Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we are so excited to continue with our learning sessions here from Jerusalem. And it is a great privilege that we have with us here this afternoon Tommy Waller, the founder of HaYovel, an amazing initiative to bring Christian volunteers from all over the world to the very heartland of Israel, Judea and Samaria. I think what Tommy is doing is a new revolution. And I would do anything to see him succeed in bringing Christians from all over the world to the vineyards of Judea and Samaria. Please, Tommy, please give him a hand.
Albert, don't go away. I have something because I know you're going to be helping us in the vineyards, and you have to have a hat when you're out there because it's sunny. And Robert, I want him to come as well.
Sure.
And so it's just the proper attire for the.
You know, when we came,
yeah,
that was one of the unforgettable, fantastic experiences that we had. These beautiful people you bring, this beautiful spirit of building something amazing on the Har Bracha, on the mountain of blessing.
Yes.
What can be better?
Nothing. Nothing can be better.
So tell us all of it.
All right, here we go. All right, I do appreciate Albert. It is a blessing. We were just talking just a while ago as we were coming here, because our organization is something that is representing something that most Christians are not fully aware of. Most of them are not fully, don't understand exactly, what these issues are in Judea and Samaria. And I don't think a lot of times we don't understand exactly what the issues are in Jerusalem. What does Jerusalem have to do with Christianity, and why should Christians be involved in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria? And I think that this is it's a critical part here because we're at a new juncture. The title today is The New Radical Christianity. The New Radical Christianity. What does that mean? What does that mean in today's time? Because obviously, we're seeing something that we didn't see before. There's a generation that's seeing something that's not, that hasn't been revealed to us in the past, and we haven't understood it. And the reason why we haven't understood it is because Israel didn't exist. Israel was desolate. Jerusalem was uninhabited almost. We've heard Mark Twain mentioned several times since we've been here at this conference. And he actually was the one who said, there's nothing here. There's nothing here. But today, we're in the city of Jerusalem. There's never been this many Jews in Jerusalem in the history of the world. And this is exciting times. A little bit of my story, and I want to get a lot, my wife said, don't say anything about me, just stick to the topic, okay? But I tell you, when I speak about radical Christianity, I have to speak about my wife and my children. Hard for me not to get emotional about it, but I have an amazing family of 11 children that are all sold out for this purpose, to see the physical restoration, the physical reality of prophecy manifesting itself in the land of Israel. And I am very grateful to have that family, to have a wife that would stand with me, because this is an amazing thing. And I wish that all the families of the earth, and that's what the promise is, right? All the families of the earth will be blessed, and I have a blessed family. I'm thankful for their courage. I'm thankful for their steadfastness. I'm thankful for their ability to just hang in there in the midst of adversity and keep moving forward. So the thing I want to start out with, just to build a little foundation here, radical Christianity, what does it look like today? Radical Christianity, and obviously I'm going to put it in the context of Israel, because it's not Israel is the definition, and we're going to dig into it in particulars, but Israel is a definition now of what radical Christianity is. There's a survey recently that came out done by the University of North Carolina, and they did a survey, and in 2018, the survey said that 79% of Christian youth from 18 to 29 believed and stood with Israel. With Israel, 79% of the Christian youth 18 to 29 stood with Israel concerning the conflict, concerning the Palestinian-Israel conflict. Recently, they did another. This is just, 2-3 years ago. Recently, they just did another survey. And in that survey, only 25% of our youth, Christian youth, are standing with Israel concerning the Israel-Palestinian conflict. And I was very upset about that. That was very shocking to me, because in this place and in this arena that we have here in this circle, it would seem that all Christians, we all get it here. We all understand what this is about. But our youth are looking for something tangible. What I have faced and what I have experienced over the last 18 years here in Israel, specifically in Judea and Samaria, is the understanding of prophecy, the reality of prophecy, the tangible reality of prophecy. What happened to me, I was farming in Tennessee. I came here to Samaria. I was brought to Samaria. I was brought to the city or the mountain, Mount Gerizim, the Mount of Blessing, as Albert said. And I met an Orthodox Jew. Now, it took the Jews, because it seems like for 4,000 years, they're waiting, right? The Jews are waiting to establish the land of Israel. Amazing that they would do that they would wait. They would have the patience to wait 4,000 years, and specifically 2,000 years, but even 2,000 years, there was an occupation. What was the occupation? The Roman occupation. They were waiting for their own country, waiting to establish their own country. And I saw it. I met this Zionist religious Jew, and I'm from Tennessee. You could probably tell by my accent. And I met for the first time, 18 years ago, first time. I came to Israel. I met an Orthodox Jew for the first time, and he read to me from the prophet Jeremiah. And Jeremiah, as we understood, was also a very persecuted prophet, as most of the prophets were. And the prophet Jeremiah believed that even though the Babylonians were about to take Israel, that one day we would see something radical happen, something extraordinary happening. What does that extraordinary thing look like? God says in Jeremiah 31 that one day, in my loving kindness, he starts the whole chapter out. Through my loving kindness, we're going to plant vineyards on the mountain. We're going to restore the ruined places of Israel. We're going to restore the ruined places of the mountains of Israel. And we're going to plant vineyards on the mountains, on the mountains of Samaria. And when he read that to me, I was standing in a vineyard on the mountain of Samaria. So the reality of that prophecy hit me very strongly. And I remember my knees got weak. I was undone. I was completely undone. And I asked him, I said, Nir, what can I'm not Jewish. What can I do? Because for the first time in my life, I saw prophecy that I could touch. On a lot of levels, because the prophecy of seeing a Jew, seeing this Jewish man returning to his homeland that the prophet spoke about, seeing a religious Jew who'd planted a vineyard that the prophets talk about. You see, Jews don't watch prophecy. Christians watch prophecy. We sit in our churches, our congregation, and this is what I'm getting at today is the new radical Christianity. Because the new radical Christian doesn't watch prophecy. They do prophecy. They do it. And we have to be those people, just like the Jewish people, to walk in the places, because the prophet spoke a lot about the nations, a lot about the nations. If you're not Jewish, it doesn't mean, okay, we're going to be watchmen. We're going to be sitting on our walls somewhere with a big screen TV, and we're going to watch and see what the Jews are doing. And then when the Jews do everything right, Jesus is going to come back, and we're going to be all happy. What? And some people are going, yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's different than that. I want to start here in Ephesians Chapter 1, or Chapter 2. Ephesians Chapter 2, it's a significant verse, because Paul, who is credited for actually disconnecting us from Israel, actually really connects us to Israel. And I want to just say, as for us, those of us who who desire to be radical Christians in this new era, this new place of radical Christianity, this is the place where we have to be. And I'll just start here in verse 10, chapter 2. For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. One of these things, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of an allergy, so please excuse me for that. Not corona, it's just allergies, I promise. In verse 11, the very next verse, he says, therefore, here's this workmanship that's created in Messiah Yeshua, therefore remember that you were once Gentiles. You were once Gentiles in the flesh who were called uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, made in the flesh by hands. Listen to this. That at that time you were without Messiah. At that time you were without Messiah, being aliens. Now what is it like to be without Messiah? You're aliens from the Commonwealth of Israel. And for our discussion today, for this discussion today in Jerusalem, let's say that Israel is Israel. Let's say that Jerusalem is Jerusalem, really Jerusalem. We're not going to spiritualize it. We're going to say the physical reality, as all of our Jewish brothers and sisters believe, that Jerusalem is going to become one day a reality. It's going to become a praise in all the earth. It will be. The physical reality of that is upon us. It's here. As we started this off, more Jews living in Jerusalem here now than ever before. So we have this, remember that, so he's saying, but at this time you were without Christ, without being aliens from the Commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Yeshua Messiah, who you were once far off. We were once far off from this reality. But because when we accepted this radical Christianity, when we accepted Yeshua as Messiah, we got connected to Israel. And so when we got connected to Israel, we got connected with who we believe that we follow, we claim to follow, Yeshua. And what does Yeshua tell us? First of all, Paul also says, and I'll go here first because it's just a page over here, Galatians chapter 3. What is the gospel? What is the gospel? Verse 8, chapter 3, verse 8. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel, listen to this, to Abraham beforehand. The scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel to Abraham beforehand, saying, in you all the nations shall be blessed. The gospel. Wait a minute, I thought the gospel started in Matthew. But Paul here is saying that the gospel actually is preached to Abraham. maybe there was some secret between God and Abraham. I don't think so. I think that God spoke to Abraham, and Yeshua was fulfilling the prophet. Let's look at Romans chapter 15. What is Romans chapter 15? And here today I'm speaking to Christians. We're trying to get on track. We're trying to get from this place of apathy that goes from 79% on fire to 25%. That's apathy within the church. That's not good. It's not good. We got to get excited, and there has to be substance to what we believe. In Romans chapter 15, in verse 8, says, "Now I say," Paul's saying this, "that Yeshua the Messiah has become a servant to the circumcision for the truth of God, to confirm the promises made to the fathers." I'm going to say it's the definition of our faith. Definition. If you're a radical Christian right here today, you're going to look at the scripture and you say, "Now I say that Yeshua the Messiah became a servant to the circumcision for the truth of God." We want the truth of God to confirm the promises. What promises was he talking about? The promises that God made to the fathers. Who's the father? Father Abraham. Remember that? Father Abraham. The promise made to the fathers. So this is the reality. This covenant is a significant place and part, a very, very strong part of what we believe. And Albert, please tell me what the time is. I'm not seeing the. Okay, great. Just go. Don't even do something like that, and I'll know for sure what's going on. So we have this in Genesis. We've been talking all week about, if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. Genesis 12. So Genesis 12 is a significant part. This is where we stood. Matter of fact, where we are in Har Barakah, we could have heard God say, "This is the land we're going to give your descendants." And I can't do it with this cold that I have now, but this is the land. We would have heard that booming voice and it wouldn't have been in English. And it is. God speaks in Hebrew, obviously. But God did this, but then he did something else. In Exodus chapter 3, he begins to talk about himself as, his name as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He says it. He says he's introducing himself here in chapter 3, Exodus chapter 3, and he says, "Moreover, I say, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. I am." That's who I am. Now, we get caught up in and maybe it's good, the Yod He Vav He. We get caught up in the I am that I am. But here he says, who do I tell these people that you are? Verse 13, when Moses said to God, "Indeed, I have come to the children of Israel to say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them?" God says, "I am who I am." And then he goes on in verse 13, "Moreover, God said to Moses, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." This is important because if you don't get this piece of the puzzle, you can't understand the promise or the understanding of Paul's preaching. Paul is preaching here about who God is, who refers to himself as to what's happening here in the land of Israel. And he refers to himself. Imagine God looking at those people, looking at first of all, the Jewish people returning to their homeland. Is God excited about that? Is God excited about that? But imagine now that the next phase, and this is what I appreciate about Rabbi Tully, is that there's another phase to this. And this final phase includes, and this is why we got to get on the to-do list, it includes the nations. It includes the nations. There are rabbis out there right now. Rabbi Melamed in Har Barakah believes this. That's why we're there. Believes that this The nations are coming, and we see it even in our own Bibles. In Romans chapter 11, what does it say? And we've all taken it in the wrong way. I guarantee you, every Christian that I know doesn't read Romans 11 like you will after I say this. But that when the fullness of the Gentiles come, in other words, let's just take it like this. When the Gentiles get it, all of Israel is going to be saved. And I'm telling you that they're not doing a repeat after me. They're waiting for the nations to get it. They're waiting for the nations to get it. The fullness of understanding, the fullness of the reality of prophecy. This is radical Christianity. This is it. We have got to move into the next level. No, it's not. We're not Hollywood people. We're not. Pastors are worried sometimes. You know, what's Tommy going to talk about? He's hanging out with those settlers. It's sad. It's sad, the stigma. Right now, there's a community in near the Tepuic Junction. Some of you, a few of you know where Tepuic Junction is. A community, Eviatar, just created, named after, actually established because 2 Jewish men were murdered at the Tepuic Junction. And the Jewish people, and I want to say this very soberly, it is a sad thing that the Jews can only advance when somebody dies. And you know why? You know why this is happening? You know why the nation of Israel had to happen? Because of 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. They brought the bulldozers in. Many of you in this room probably don't even know what's happening in Eviatar. Don't even know what's going on because nobody's covering this. But there's a war going on out there for the land of Israel. There's a war going on. In Christianity, the apathetic Christianity, not the radical Christians. The radical, fierce believers in Yeshua are walking with the faith of these Jewish men and women. And right now there's an attack on this community. There's an attack. There were hundreds of families that not hundreds, but I think 50 families moved into this community almost immediately. Because of the death a couple of weeks ago. Yehuda, what was his last name? It was Yehuda. Anyway, he was shot and was murdered at the Tepuic Junction, and they immediately started this community. But nobody in the Christian community would even know that it was even happening. But we got to know. We've got to be a part of this thing. We've got to be a part of what's happening. And I want to just say that this covenant, this covenant who God refers to himself as, is an important part of our faith. Because the third commandment isn't about just using God's name in vain. It's not just using God's name in some cuss word or something. God's name in the third commandment is in the Jewish world, the unforgivable sin. You shall not take the name of God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless. The Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. If God is referring to himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then I am not a person that can say, no, you're not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am not allowed, I don't have the ability to say it. I cannot speak against the word of God. I especially cannot speak against what God calls himself. I'm not going to mock God. And I'm not going to take his name in vain. Radical Christianity has got to take this up. We've got to take this up. Last week, there was a Torah portion. And the Torah portion was devastating. But the most horrible portion in all of Scripture. It was devastating because we heard this. The 10 spies came back, and they said there are giants in the land. We can't take it. Let's go back to Egypt. They even referred to Egypt as the land of milk and honey, like some of us refer to America. Don't do it. There's only one land of milk and honey. It's here, but it's the land of milk and honey when people are returning back to it. When the Jews began to come back to the land of Israel, the land responded. It became a flourishing place, and it's continuing to become a flourishing place. But there was another story in the Haftorah, which is something different, because there were spies that were sent out. The spies were sent out here into Jericho. And in Jericho, they met this Gentile woman. Our Bibles refer to her as a harlot. Interesting, God uses interesting characters. Hallelujah. It's a great Christian, great Christian testimony here, right? But what is the first thing? Here's radical Christianity. Listen to this. The first thing that Rahab says to the spies, verse 8, chapter 2, Joshua chapter 2, verse 8. Now, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land. I know that the Lord has given you the land. And I'm telling you, when we come here and we see the Jewish people here, the first thing out of our mouths, whether it's Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, or Judea and Samaria, these places in 1967 is a place where we have to, because we won the war, okay? And I'm wrapping up here. We won the war. 1967, how many believe there was a miracle? We believe it was a miracle, and we believe it's a miracle. Then if we believe it's a miracle, then we need to stand in the miracle. We need to stand as radical believers in the covenant that God made with Israel. And this is the place that we have to be. This is the place we're going. And this is why we have to have Christians putting feet, beautiful feet, on the mountains of Israel. Amen. Amen.
Tommy, our viewers, and there are many online, if they want to find more information about you, how can they do that?
The only thing you really need to do is go to serveisrael.com. Simple as that. Serveisrael.com. You want to serve? What did Yeshua say? I came to serve and not to be served, right? So as Christians, we need to take a heart of servitude. So serveisrael.com. That's it.
And I know that there's a lot of material on your website.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, you guys produce talk shows.
Oh, yeah.
And podcasts.
Yes.
And shows, movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you can all find it on Serve Israel.
You can go to Serve Israel, or you can go to the Joshua and Caleb Report. .com, joshuaandcalebreport.com, which is we're actually changing the name to the Israel Guys. The Israel Guys. We're trying to make it simple. People get.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you so much.
You.
Appreciate it. Now, our next speaker is the most unusual person that I've met. We have the honor with us today to have Michigan Supreme Court Justice Richard Bernstein with us. His theme is how to have a relationship with the Creator, even with disabilities. A man who is born blind has run 26 marathons. How many Ironman? 1 Ironman. I think this is the most unusual person I've ever met. Richard, please, the stage is yours.
If God is so great, why is it that bad things happen to otherwise such good people? Why is it that there are some who come to know a greater struggle or greater hardship or greater challenge than others? What about the people who now have a table just set for one? And as one writer penned, why is it that the streets of heaven are too crowded with angels? People ask, so what are the qualities that go into being a Supreme Court justice? When making decisions that affect people's lives, is it about your ability to research and to write, your ability to publish, or your academic background? I always say that none of those things really matter, for it comes down to one thing and one thing only: life experience. I have come to believe that God gives us our experiences for a reason. He gives us our reasons so that we have a purpose, that we understand why we are here, why we are created. It is only through struggle and challenge and adversity that we can come to truly know, understand, and appreciate those who exist around us. As we go through life, we don't always have to be happy. We don't always have to smile. We don't always have to feel good. When we develop a relationship with the Creator, it doesn't always have to be out of praise. It doesn't always have to be out of gratitude. It doesn't always have to be out of joy. It can often be a real relationship of struggle, a relationship of setback, a relationship of pain, a relationship of frustration, a relationship of anger, because those are real emotions. Those are raw. Those are genuine. But they are lasting, they are profound, and they are real. So often people comment and they say, when people are finding struggle and hardship in their life, when they are dealing with immense loss, people will often say, oh yes, but God loves you. And while we all know that to be true, there is something more powerful that can be said to people who are going through real hardship. And that is that God needs you. He needs you to understand why you're here. He needs you to go out and have an impact. He needs you to help others. He needs you to serve with a purpose. He needs you to understand that mission. So why is it that bad things happen to otherwise such good people? And why is it that there are some who come to know a greater struggle or greater hardship than others? So often when you encounter someone who has faced real loss, real devastation, people will often say to them, oh, you're going to make a full recovery. Everything is going to be fine. And I can honestly tell you, when you say those comments to people, it comes off as hollow. Because so often, most people are not going to be okay. And they're not going to be fine. The key to understanding the Creator is learning how to adapt. How to adapt to a life that you might not want, but to the life that you have ultimately been given. It's not always about that power of recovery, but it's about finding a new road or a new path. Life can change in an instant. It can change without warning, and it will change without any notice. Now, as you heard in the introduction, I have been blessed to have had the opportunity of completing 24 marathons and a full Ironman competition. For those of you who are unfamiliar, an Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim, followed by a 112-mile bike to be completed by a 26.2-mile run. The rules of the competition are quite simple. If you stop, if you rest, if you take a break, you run the risk of missing a cutoff. If a cutoff is missed, you will be immediately disqualified from the competition. If you finish at 12:05 instead of 12 o'clock, it is like you were never even there. 2 years of effort, work, and training will literally be for naught. So I invite you to picture, if you would, the feeling you would have as you dive into a frigid body of water. The water temperature that morning of Lake Coeur d'Alene was 55 degrees. Imagine swimming in total darkness. You don't have any idea where you are. You don't have any idea where you're going. You can't communicate with your guide because you're underwater and so is he. Other swimmers swim on top of you, kick you in the face. Being blind, you can't brace for that ensuing impact. It's not uncommon to have others become entangled and ensnared in the rope that connects you to your guide. And as they become entangled, the rope starts to constrict. And as the rope constricts, it starts taking you below the surface. It's easy to have a relationship with God when things are good, when your business is going well, when your loved ones are all healthy. But I've come to find that if you want to have a real relationship, it's what happens when you're afraid, when you're feeling pain, and when you have an uncertain outcome. That's when you come to truly know the Creator. You learn at certain points in life that there are some of us who are infirmed, and there are some of us who are clearly mortal. But it's always those people who have the strongest of spirits and who allow for the soul to disconnect from the flesh and ultimately pierce the heavens. So why is it that bad things happen to otherwise such good people? And why is it that there are some who come to know a greater struggle or greater hardship or a greater pain than others can possibly begin to imagine or even remotely comprehend? Life can change at an instant, and it can change for all of us. It was a beautiful morning in New York Central Park. I've memorized the loop that serves as the circumference of the park. At that point, I had completed 17 marathons. I was walking in the pedestrian lane, thinking about what was going to happen with November's marathon. But it was August 13th. It was 85 and sunny. Things could not have been better. I was feeling good and my body was in mint condition. As I walked in the pedestrian lane, a route that I knew well and had taken many times before, a bicyclist was traveling at a speed of in excess of 35 miles an hour. And due to such a high rate of speed, when he hit the top of the park's biggest hill, he wasn't able to maintain control of his bicycle. And due to that, veered into the pedestrian lane where I was walking and struck me directly in the back. Now, a 35-mile-an-hour impact is catastrophic. This required over 10 weeks of hospitalization at New York's Mount Sinai Hospital. Athletics was my entire life. It was my identity. I had used it to cope with my blindness. It gave me such a sense of pride. It allowed me to have such strength, such power, such independence. And now in Mount Sinai, you come to learn a new lesson about life. Life isn't really about the big things. Yes, we talk about the policy. Yes, we talk about politics. Yes, we talk about things on a grand scale. But for most of us, life really isn't about those things. Life is really about the little things. You really miss what it's like to have the opportunity to use the bathroom without help. You miss what it's like to have the chance to take a hot shower. You miss how it feels to get an actual good night's sleep without having to writhe in pain. That simply doesn't allow for you to find peace. People used to come to visit Sinai, and I'd always ask them, so tell me, where are you going to go when you leave the hospital? They'd always say in a very rudimentary and incredibly mundane way that, oh, I'm going to go back to the office. I've got to run a few errands. I'm meeting some friends for dinner. I would always tell them, you have to savor that. These are things that people like me dream about. We spend our nights dreaming what it's like to have the chance to be with people. We spend our nights dreaming what it's like to be in a restaurant. We spend our nights dreaming what it's like to feel actual fresh air. No, life isn't about the big. It's always about the little. And I think what we learn as we go through life and we try to find our place is what we're all looking for is one simple thing. We're trying to find a sense of peace. And we're trying to understand just where it is that we belong. And I would ask people that as we go on this journey, try to celebrate those small victories. No matter how inconsequential or insignificant you think they are, try to find a cause for celebration. In my situation, I would celebrate the fact that I could start lifting my leg. I would celebrate the fact that I could, with a lot of effort and a lot of pain, use a walker. And I would celebrate the fact that I could actually find my way to the end of my ward to visit the nurses on my own power. No, it's not about the big. It's always about the little. But it's okay to challenge the Creator. And it's okay to find that energy and that struggle within you. And it's okay to ask Him why. And it's okay to try to demand answers. And it's okay to have that raw human emotion. Because when you have that, and when you feel that, and when you experience that, then ultimately real miracles can happen. Because in my situation, it became time to run the New York City Marathon. And after getting out of the hospital and working through rehab and facing the challenges, the marathon was upon us. And this would be Marathon 18, but it would be the first after a catastrophic injury. Now, running through the streets of New York with a shattered hip and crushed pelvis was going to be painful, to say the least. But as we ran, and we approached mile 18, and we crossed the 59th Street Bridge, and we began running up First Avenue, I remember the pain was becoming so profound. It was becoming so severe that I reached up to the heavens, and I prayed to God, and I said, Hashem, let me have this. Let me have this. This is something that I need. This is something that I've earned. I can handle your pain. I can handle what I'm going through, but I can't pass out. I can't lose consciousness. You have to let me have this. And when this conversation was happening on First Avenue at mile 18, I can tell you that this was nothing short of a war. You could hear within my soul and within my spirit. You could hear the thunder. You could see the lightning. You could sense the winds. You could see that this was going to be the battle that was going to define all battles, that this was going to be the essence and the cornerstone of our relationship, that this was going to be the pinnacle of my anger and my frustration. And then, at that moment and at that time, miracles do happen, because I was able to find what it was that I was looking for. I was able to find peace. Peace with my new body, peace with my new life, peace with my new circumstance. But I, at that moment, after that raging war, was able to find peace with God. Why is it that bad things happen to otherwise such good people? And why is it that there are some who come to know a greater struggle or greater hardship than others can possibly imagine? I think the answer goes something like this. At a certain point in life, you can't spend your time and your energy and your effort focusing on how you're going to get over it. For you come to realize that there is simply no other option but to just get on with it. For ultimately, it is always the people who must do what is hard that achieve no less than what is truly great. And we have to look at our lives like we're part of a great story. And within any novel, there's going to be chapters. There's going to be chapters of pain. There's going to be chapters of setback. There's going to be chapters of frustration. But it's only through those chapters you're going to come to find hope. You're going to come to know purpose. And you're going to come to understand triumph. It was deep into the night as the angel came upon Jacob, and there existed an immense battle that raged until the dawn. As we all know, when the sun rose, the angel blessed Jacob, but he gave him a new name, the name of Israel, which translates to mean, as we all know, one who struggles with God. If I hadn't been given the experiences that I was given, I wouldn't be as good of a judge. I wouldn't be kind. I wouldn't be merciful. I wouldn't be empathetic. And I wouldn't be understanding. We have to celebrate who we are. We have to celebrate the journey that we're on. We have to come to realize that for many of us, our dreams get replaced by wisdom. But we have to celebrate Hashem. We have to celebrate our purpose. We have to celebrate our mission. We have to celebrate why it is that we were created. And we have to celebrate the simple notion that, yes, for so many, we are mortal and we are infirmed. But it is our spirits and it is our souls that truly know no bounds. And with that, let us say, Amen.
This is the most powerful testimony that I've heard. And imagine a Supreme Court justice with such compassion and understanding. Reminds me of the book of Hebrews. It is so powerful. Richard, we're so thankful to you. I'm sure that our viewers online are crying as I am, because your testimony is so powerful. It is a testimony of victory in the most adverse circumstances, not giving up, not despairing, looking up and not down, looking up to your Creator and finding Him. What can be better? Let's give another applause. Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. Wow, what a fantastic, powerful testimony. Our next speaker is the director of the Strategic Alliances, Partnerships, should be alliances, for Passages, a great organization bringing hundreds and thousands of young Christians to Israel. And Luke, why don't you tell us what it is all about? What is your vision and what are you burning for? Come, please. Let's give a hand to Luke Bray.
Well, I want to start off by saying thank you to Albert for allowing me to follow that incredible presentation. So, just as Bernstein, his story was riveting and his experience, I think, jarring for us, so many of us who have not experienced such kinds of difficulties. And so, thankful for the opportunity to be able to hear him. Well, good afternoon. I'm thankful to be here. This is actually my first time to be able to come to the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, and so I'm incredibly thankful to just be here, but then to have the opportunity to speak to you at this gathering is a true honor, and so I thank you for that. We're going to go through a few slides together, but the first thing that I want to mention to you is something about maps. If you'll go to the first slide, maps have always captured my imagination. Each map tells a different kind of story, a story of possibilities and maybe even a journey. But each map also displays a unique perspective. One of my favorite maps was created by Heinrich Bunting in 1581. And it's a map of the world, but it's a map of the world from his perspective. Bunting's map is designed in the shape of a clover leaf, and it only shows 3 specific continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. And the leaves are arranged, as you can see, in the form of a clover leaf, but with Jerusalem as the center. Now, I've seen a lot of different maps in my lifetime, a lot of different perspectives from these maps, different center points. Now, as an American, I will just say that most of the maps that we have in the United States, have the United States at the center of the map. There's just something about Americans that puts us right there, right? But I've also seen other kinds of maps, maps where Australia is the center of the globe, right? Or Antarctica at the center of the globe. But Bunting's map declares something really important. It heralds a truth that all of us who have gathered here at the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast continue to echo until this day. That Jerusalem is the center of this place, this world. Jerusalem, the city of God, the city of David. It's not just significant for Christians, and it's not just significant for Jews. It's not just significant for Muslims, but it stands at the center of the world and of history. Now, much has changed in the last 400 years. Wars have been fought. Schisms have risen. The Jewish people face the threat of annihilation. But now, 73 years after a homeland was established for the Jewish people, we meet together in a sacred city with a sacred story. But sadly, the story of Jerusalem, and most significantly, the story of the King who reigns from Zion, is not familiar to the next generation. Go to the next slide. As we gather here in 2021, we meet at a moment of great importance. The sons of Korah in the Psalms help us to understand not only the sacredness of Jerusalem, but they also help us to understand how the next generation can be introduced to the roots of their faith, the land of Israel and its people. If you look at that text there, you see in Psalm 48, beginning in verse 10, it says, "As your name, O God, so your praise reaches to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is filled with righteousness. Let Mount Zion be glad. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments. Walk about Zion. Go around her. Number her towers. Consider well her ramparts. Go through her citadels, that you may tell the next generation that this is God, our God, forever and ever. He will guide us forever." Now, there's several notable observations that we can make from that particular psalm. The writers are committed to a vision of God that is global in scope, a vision that captures the attention of the world, the nations even. And in order to capture the world's imagination, to inspire praise of God, he issues this command that they ought to walk about Zion, so that they may tell the next generation about who God is. And friends, this brings us to our problem. You can go to the next slide. A recent Barna poll found that support for Israel among younger evangelical Christians is falling. Young evangelicals are less supportive of Israel than ever before, and they're also less informed. The same poll found that 65% of young evangelicals say that they seldom or never hear about the importance of Israel. Only 12% say that they hear about the importance of Israel every week. These statistics fit into a broader picture of Generation Z Christians and their disengagement from the church. According to Barna's Gen Z report, only 4% of Gen Z holds a biblical worldview, and among Gen Z Christians, only 9% say that they are engaged Christians. Younger evangelicals aren't simply losing their confidence in Israel as a force for good, they're also not connecting with the land and with their faith through their church community in the same way that maybe their parents did or their grandparents did. What's more, anti-Semitism is on the rise in college campuses. Disconnected from their faith lives and exposed unknowingly to anti-Semitism on college campuses, it's no wonder that young evangelicals do not feel the same about their faith and about Israel as those who came before them. Now, while these problems are nuanced, younger Christians seem to be both uninformed of the complexities surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but also they do not possess the wonder of visiting the Holy Land and walking in the steps of the patriarchs and the kings and Jesus and his disciples. In the next slide, we see that in a poll of over 700 evangelical Christians between the ages of 18 and 29 that was conducted between March and April, participants were asked where they placed their support in the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. Look at these numbers. Just 33.6% said they aligned themselves with Israel. 24.3% said with the Palestinians, and 42.2% said with neither side. Next slide. Look at this. This is a marked shift from 2018, when 69% indicated support for Israel. 5.6% said they sided with the Palestinians, and 25.7% said that they didn't take a side either way. The next slide, we see this disparity or the discrepancy between older and younger generations. Oh, keep going.
The one before didn't have the statistics.
Oh, really? There we go. Another clip. There we go. You can go ahead. There's 3. There you go. All right. When evangelicals were asked to explain the discrepancy between younger and older evangelicals regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as you can note up there, 34% said that it had to do with generational differences. 22.5% said that it had to do with younger evangelicals having less knowledge about the conflict. And 29.8% said that they didn't know why there was a discrepancy. Now, these statistics indicate not only a lack of knowledge, but also a lack of interest among younger evangelicals. Younger evangelicals are more focused upon issues that affect them on a day-to-day basis. Thank you. Their opinions about Israel are shaped by the prevalent culture and voices around them. Negative stories about Israel abound around the world as the next generation obtains most of the information about global events from social media and from a news or press industry untethered to facts and truth. Another contributing factor is the competing theological vision between older and younger evangelicals. Many young evangelicals do not share their parents' vision of eschatology, which puts Israel at the very center of their thinking oftentimes. And so as a result, the next generation is left confused about how Israel fits into their world and fits into their theology. What we do know about the next generation is that they are all about experiences. In fact, they want to experience truth before they are fully applying it to their lives. So the problem to us is obvious. Younger evangelical support and their love for Israel is waning, which is concerning, especially in light of Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer's statement. Just recently, he said in the next slide, people have to understand that the backbone of Israel's support in the United States is the evangelical Christians. It's true because of numbers and also because of their passion and unequivocal support for Israel. What younger American evangelicals need is an opportunity to see for themselves the intimate connection between biblical Christianity and the people and places of Israel. And there is no better way to do this than by learning about Israel firsthand through an encounter in the land. Next slide. The solution to this problem must be centered upon robust education and spiritual encounter for the next generation. Scott Phillips, who is our executive director at Passages, writes, younger Christians owe it to themselves to see Israel for themselves and experience the presence of God in the lands described so richly in the Bible. There may be no better way for Christians to connect with their faith, their history, and their Jewish friends. Next slide. A trip to Israel is a rite of passage for every Christian. There is no substitute for walking in the land where Jesus walked and traversing the paths of the patriarchs, the kings, the prophets, the first disciples. In fact, Israel, we see Israel is such an incredible place for students to come and to learn and to encounter the Holy Spirit as they walk the places of Israel. In Israel, participants encounter the origins of both ancient and biblical faith and of a present-day nation, rich with culture, with diversity, with beauty, and with challenges. The land and the people of Israel have a story to tell, and by coming to Israel, students are able to make Israel's story a part of their own story. Through a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and intensive post-trip education, Passages strengthens the faith of American Christian college students, connects them to Israel, and prepares them for a life of Christ-centered leadership. Participants encounter the ancient roots of their biblical faith firsthand and are introduced to a modern and thriving Israel through visits to foundational biblical sites and by hearing authentic first-person perspectives from Jewish, Christian, and Muslim Israelis and Christian and Muslim Palestinians. And upon their return, participants have opportunities to further engage, to continue leadership training, to join an active alumni network, and to become informed voices for their Christian faith, for Israel, and for all who live in the region. Next slide. Passages has three major focuses in the program. The first is faith. Strong identity in Christ is a cornerstone of Christian leadership. Passages offers participants one of the most powerful and compelling means of encountering God and the Bible. By visiting the Holy Land, students discover the deep roots of Christianity in a place where the ancient faith was born, bringing the Bible tangibly to life. The second theme is Israel, obviously. Passages participants connect to a modern land, a modern Israel, which is not only rich with history, but also with culture and ingenuity and technological innovation. Passages facilitates personal ties to the Holy Land through visits to biblical sites and by showcasing that vibrant, modern Israel. Students return equipped to build bridges of understanding and friendship with Israel, the diverse people that live here, and the Jewish communities that they will interact with when they return home. The final theme is leadership. Effective leaders have values and formative experiences which help shape their lives and their callings. What Passages does is we give students the opportunity to discover their spiritual heritage and develop strong convictions. Through post-trip activities, students learn to lead, encourage, and inspire their communities back home. There's 4 phases that you'll see in the next slide, 4 phases to the Passages program. The first phase is the introduction course. This first phase really is an online course that helps students understand what they're going to be experiencing in Israel. The course includes modules that teach them about the roots of Christianity, about the biblical redemptive narrative, about Jewish-Christian relations, and about pieces with regard to the modern history of Israel. The second phase is the field study. The field study is where we bring them to Israel. The Passages itinerary, as you have in your packet there, is designed to point students toward the roots of their faith and to introduce them to the complex landscape of modern Israel. Participants visit sites like Capernaum, or the Mount of Beatitudes, or the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Garden of Gethsemane, and this is just a few. As you can see on the sample itinerary there in your packet, you can see that there are more. But they also hear from diverse range of local speakers who help them understand Israeli culture, government, economy, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and geopolitical security issues surrounding Israel today. The third phase is the Capstone Project. When students return home, they complete a capstone project. And this post-trip engagement program expands upon the educational themes that they've experienced on their trip in Israel and includes additional case studies about biblical and modern figures and how they might be able to apply principles of leadership to their own leadership journey. The last phase is the Passages Leaders Network. This is the final phase, but it's a phase that really never ends. Passages Leaders Network creates value for our alumni through intentional connections. The community offers further engagement and additional educational opportunities related to faith, related to Israel. It also facilitates ongoing mentorship, job opportunities, intern opportunities, as well as industry-specific groups. Since its conception 5 years ago, Passages has taken nearly 8,000 students to Israel. As well as saying 8,000, I say that sounds like a big number. We want to take thousands more. Our heart's desire is to see thousands and thousands of young Christians come to Israel. Next slide. This is a testimony of one of our alums. And Latasha Mitchell, she says this. She says, putting it simply, this trip opened my eyes and my heart. I fell in love with the people, the culture, and the complexity of Israel, all which left me changed with a desire for more. Now, surveys with significant sample size of Passages alumni indicate the effectiveness of the Passages program. And if you have any doubt about this, let me give you some numbers. First, 97% of students reported a greater awareness of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a result of traveling with Passages. 87% of students reported a greater understanding of the importance of U.S. and Israel relations. 94% of students reported that they are more likely to discuss the importance of Israel with their peers after they return home from an encounter in Israel. 92% of students stated that as a result of their experience with Passages, they have a deeper understanding of the Scriptures and a deeper connection to their faith. Friends, perspective matters. Journeys matter. The next generation of Christians and their relationship with their faith and with the Jewish people, it matters. Impacting the next generation to love Israel and to dig deeply into their faith requires an encounter. And how can they have this encounter unless they walk about Zion? Our charge to the next generation is this: walk about Zion. Go around her, number her towers, consider well her ramparts, go through her citadels, that you may tell the next generation that this is God. Our God forever and ever. He will guide us forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Okay, you want to show a video now? Go ahead. Well, there is a video that is not really there yet, but look at me. I'm better than a video, believe me. We love in-person things, these days. I hope. I have two examples that comes to my mind. First is our co-chair, Congresswoman Michele Bachmann. She was in Israel in 1974, after the high school. I don't know how many months she spent in a kibbutz in Beersheba, but this changed her life forever. The second person that comes to my mind is President Hernandez, who is about to come in 2 weeks from Honduras. He was part of the Mashav program in the foreign ministry. Can you imagine what an impact? Just bring them here. Well, it's not just bring them. Somebody has to pay for it. Did I get it right? How can people find Passages on the website, on the internet? Passagesisrael.org. So,
and if they're interested in talking about how they can be supportive of the Passages program, they can email me directly.
and people you can also, everybody who is watching us online, you can contact Luke Bray personally. You can just Google. You can Google you. They can Google you and find you. So you are Googleable. And the video is ready, so let's go for the video now.
As I sat there on the plane, I couldn't help but to feel anticipation. That everything that led up to this moment was finally here. I was ready to walk through the lands of the Bible, taking the steps of King David, Jesus, and the disciples. This was the stage where history and stories played themselves out, where I could walk and pray and watch as the Bible would come to life. jumping off the pages at me. But what would I think? How would it feel? And what would it change?
It feels amazing to walk in the footsteps of Jesus because it's like they're real people. I get to see these major biblical characters like David and Solomon, all of these people who have shaped my faith, and they're not these big giants in the Bible, they're people like you and me.
Being in that moment with like the crashing waves and the sun beaming through the clouds and playing worship music on this boat, it's just like such a powerful moment. It was just great to just see God's power and His majesty displayed.
It's crazy to look off the Mount of Beatitudes and think, wow, this hasn't changed a whole lot from when Jesus stood here.
Just standing like in amazement at being here. And I think that having had that experience has made the Bible come to life for me, made my faith come to life for me in a much more tangible way. It isn't just in your head. It's not just something that like people have just made up. There's physical evidence of things that happened here.
My biggest aha moment while I was here in Israel was being at the Mount of Olives and just being in that place where Jesus was and where He walked on that Friday and where He prayed.
When you go back and you read the Gospels, it makes a huge difference because for the first time you can actually see where it happened.
Really seeing the Bible come to life and just seeing those stories come to life off of the pages is something that's just almost magical in a sense. It's just able to strengthen your faith more than you ever thought it could.
It would be impossible not to be changed after visiting this place. Reading the Bible is one thing. Experiencing it is another. And now, when I open to read the Word, or close my eyes to pray, I feel I can finally see.
That was beautiful. Well done. Thank you so much, Luke, for coming, and Kim, and you both were amazing. I remember hearing that I think it was a Kufi event when they announced how late Sheldon Adelson wrote a check $1 million for their campus work. Well, I know there are people online just getting notes and notices all the time from Brazil and the United States and all kinds of places. So please, you can just, write a check. If it's not 1 million, it's also good. So thank you, Luke, so much. It's a beautiful project, fantastic, and so needed idea. Thank you for coming. We have a very special person here with us. You all who sit in this hall, you wouldn't be in Israel unless we had the help from Sharon Regev. I also need to recognize Mayan Rockland for being so helpful late at night, early in the morning, fighting for your permits to enter the land. You've been like angels for us to make this event possible. And I was so happy when we went to the anti-terrorism learning school, Lothar. But my heart was really touched when we went to see the Iron Dome and heard the IDF spokesperson. I was in tears. I was so proud of my country. So thank you, Sharon, for being with us. Please come and share from your heart.
Dear friends, shalom. Thank you. Let's do it again. Shalom.
Shalom.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is truly, truly my great honor and great privilege to attend this Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast 2021. And on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would like to express our deepest appreciation to the organizers of this very important, crucial gathering. Thank you, Mr. Albert Veksler. Thank you, Mr. Robert Ilatov. And thank you, each and every one of you, dear friends. I want to thank you so much for taking your time during this challenging COVID-19 period, pandemic. You took the time and you came to Israel to show your solidarity and sympathy with the state of Israel. I want to give you a round of applause. Dear friends, thank you for supporting Israel, and thank you for encouraging others to be the Ruths and Esthers for Israel. You are our partners in fulfilling the prophecy of Israel becoming a light unto the nations. People like you, watchmen on the wall for Zion, who stand in the gap for Israel and the Jewish people, God has put into your hearts the call for Israel, and you have accepted it. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. May God bless you. Distinguished guests, my name is Sharon Regev, and I am a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. I am also the mother of 2 Israeli sons. My older son is 18 and a half, and I am proud to say he is a soldier in the Israeli Air Force. I am the director of the Department for World Religions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I truly love the mission of serving Israel's foreign ministry in the advancement of Jewish-Christian relationship. As part of my job, I walk the streets of the old city of Jerusalem on a daily basis. Don't you envy me? I follow the paths of King David, King Solomon, and all our prophets. Every day, I witness miracles. I rejoice every day in the miracle of being born in a sovereign, reborn Jewish state. Thank you. In May 1948, amidst the ashes of the Holocaust, the modern state of Israel was founded in its historic homeland, the land of Israel. This is where the Jewish people's spiritual, religious, and political identities were shaped. After 2,000 years of exile, during which time we yearned to come back to Jerusalem, our holy city, the Jewish state was founded with its capital in that same city, the holy city of Jerusalem. It has been only 73 years since the rebirth of the State of Israel. In its relatively very short existence, the reborn State of Israel has reached tremendous achievements. Ladies and gentlemen, we should celebrate. We have made the desert bloom. Thank you. Israel has become one of the most creative and innovative countries in the world, a startup nation. Our technology is cutting edge, and our economy, thank God, is booming. Our military is one of the finest in the world. Without natural resources, we have influenced the world in medicine, in commerce, technology, agriculture, in every path of life. We became a first world power where people from around the world wish to invest in. Our accolades are only through the grace of God and His protection over the land and the people. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so honored to have you here in Israel. You are our first delegation after more than a year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for coming here, and thank God for having Israel, one of the first country, perhaps the first country, to enter the post-COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, even Wonder Woman has become Israeli. From technology to humanitarian aid, we are serving as a nation state the tenets of the Bible, where all human beings are created in the image of God. However, we see that not everyone acknowledges the image of God in humanity. In fact, there are evil, radical forces in this region who are actively seeking the destruction of people who do not subscribe to their brand of religion. Their ideological hatred is willing to murder their own brothers and sisters who identify with Islam. Radical Islam is using networks of terror to take away the biblical foundation that has shaped not only Western civilization, but also Islam itself, that the image of God is in every human being, that all of us are the children of God, and we're all created in His image. Instead, radical Islam wishes to enslave and destroy that fundamental teaching, insisting that the only valid human being is one who is like them. Ladies and gentlemen, your presence here in Israel is coming just a few days after we have reached the ceasefire at the conclusion of Operation Guardian of the Walls. The State of Israel was attacked by a ruthless terrorist organization who tries, still now as we speak, and is determined to murder and injure as many innocent Israeli civilians as possible. In just 11 days, more than 4,300 rockets were fired indiscriminately by the Hamas murderous terrorist organization at Israeli civilian centers in order to kill as many Israelis as possible. The Hamas terrorist organization, whose motto is to wipe Israel off the map, attacked Israel as part of its desire to weaken the Palestinian Authority and moderate forces who are interested in maintaining regional stability. It is stoking the same kind of Islamist extremism, fanaticism that the entire Middle East experienced under ISIS. Hamas, which instigated this confrontation, is cynically exploiting the control it wields over the people of the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, it is celebrating the suffering of its own people. The people of Gaza are victims. They are taken hostage by the Hamas terrorist organization. Israel had no choice but to take action to defend its citizens. This was an act of self-defense. We embarked on an operation that we did not want, but we were prepared for, and ultimately, we attained many achievements that severely damaged the power and capabilities of this vicious terror organization. As we discussed in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Hamas, whose motto is to wipe Israel off the map, instigated this confrontation, wanted to control the people of Gaza and use them as human shields. Our message to the people of Gaza is simple. Hamas is both our enemy and yours. It's time to free Palestinians from Hamas and Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel is seeking peace. We yearn for peace. We want to live in peace and security with our neighbors. We want our neighbors to thrive. Every loss of life, both Israeli and Palestinians, is terrible. We grieve any loss of life. Israel went into unprecedented length to prevent civilian casualties. We targeted terrorist sites with the greatest possible precision and accuracy. As you have heard this week, the IDF employed such tactics as roof knocking and calling Gazan civilians to give them advance warning to evacuate an area which before was decided as a terror target to be struck. The reason the IDF even has to engage in such precautions is that Hamas uses its own civilians as human shields. The people of Gaza are victims of Hamas. They are prisoners, and they are used mercilessly as human shields. Hamas has purposely embedded its headquarters, weapons caches, and rocket launchers deeply within its civilian areas, in schools, in hospitals, in homes, for years. This is a double war crime against both the Israeli population they are targeting as well as their own people. When there are civilian casualties, it is because they purposefully put their people, often children, in harm's way. Just this week, UNRWA admitted that they discovered a terror attack tunnel underneath one of their schools in the Gaza Strip. Ladies and gentlemen, nonetheless, many have criticized Israel. We saw We saw it in many social media outlets, as well as mainstream media. We see the mainstream media time and again playing into the hands of this vicious, murderous, terrorist organization. They're promoting their false and deceptive narrative and propagating strong anti-Israel sentiments across the Western world. These actions directly correlate to the horrifyingly sharp increase in anti-Semitism that we have been witnessing, unfortunately, not only in Europe, but also in North America. Within living memory of the Holocaust, anti-Semitism has returned. Jewish communities around the world are under constant threat. Anti-Semitism has mutated into a new form of anti-Zionism. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an early warning sign of dangerous dysfunction within society and culture. The hate that begins here, the hate that begins with Jews, will never end with Jews. We have to fight it. Criticizing Israel without proportion and applying on it a special moral standard which is not applied on any other nation in the world is dangerous. It's dangerous to all democracies and to all those who seek democratic values. It serves to encourage and support the terrorists, which is detrimental to all those who want peace and a better future. Those who should be criticized are the perpetrators of double war crimes who are hiding behind civilians who are firing on civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, I say it with a very heavy heart. As in the same places in the Middle East where once Jewish communities existed and thrived, Christians are now refused their core basic rights. They are persecuted, murdered, abducted, living under terror and constant threat. We are very concerned about the deficit of religious freedom in our wider region. The historic Christian communities are in a process of severe contraction. At the beginning of the 20th century, Christians made up about 20% of the Middle Eastern population. Today, this number is somewhere between 3 to 5%. Can you imagine? Dear friends, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. I would like to repeat it. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And it is fully committed to protecting freedom of religion and freedom of worship. For the first time in the land, Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike live their religious lives as they see fit. Israel is the only country in the region whose Christian community is growing and thriving. Thank you. Religious freedom is at the very heart of the Jewish tradition. Our founding patriarch, Abraham, departed Ur of the Chaldeans at the command of God, seeking to worship freely one God who was not an idol and who could not be seen, but was all-knowing and all-powerful, the source of truth, the good, and the creator of everything. from the ancient Israelites in Egypt, through the Maccabees, through the great revolt against the Roman Empire in 66 AD, the Spanish Inquisition, to the heroic struggle of Soviet Jews whose religion and identity were crushed under communism. The Jewish story is a quest for religious and spiritual freedom. For this reason, Israel, the state of the Jewish people, is particularly sensitive to the protection of religious worship for all religions in Israel, and for the advancement of this cause throughout the world. Israel is committed to peace. Our vision is to fulfill Isaiah's vision. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Unfortunately, there are nations like Iran who do not subscribe to this ideal of peace. The Islamic Republic of Iran is an authoritarian, theocratic regime that strictly imposes Sharia law in Iran. It has become a force for destabilization, terror, and insurgency across the Middle East and the globe. For over 20 years, this fanatic regime has been working to obtain nuclear weapons capabilities, all the while threatening the total destruction of Israel. Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons and their delivery systems are the greatest threat to world peace today. Its ballistic and cruise missiles have the capability to carry nuclear warheads not only to Israel, but as far as to the heart in Europe, and later to North America. Ladies and gentlemen, Iran has declared repeatedly its intentions to wipe Israel off the map. It is building an aggressive empire. It is seeking to build a land bridge from Tehran to the Mediterranean through Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. It is moving its army, its air force, and its navy to Syria to be able to attack Israel from closer hand. Through its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it is seeking Israel's destruction. We must be able to defend our state. We must be able to defend our shared values. And we have to expose those whose intentions are to destroy us. As we heard before, in Psalm 48, God commands to walk about Zion, go around her, consider well her ramparts, go through her citadels, that you may tell the next generation that this is God, our God. Dear friends, you have seen our towers, ramparts, and citadels. We are relying on you to carry the message to your own people and governments to stand with Israel. Coming to Israel is more than recharging our spiritual batteries or walking in the footsteps of one's faith. It is a form of worship that comes with responsibility. When we walk these streets, our feet are praying. Our biblical teachings are amplified here more than in any other place in the world. Dear friends, we ask you today to speak up for Israel. we must take action against the spread of fanaticism and radical ideologies. We must oppose evil. As Israel is in the forefront of the battle against Islamist extremism and radicalism, supporting Israel is supporting our shared Judeo-Christian values of mercy, of love, of peace, of stability and security. Distinguished guests, dear friends, we Israelis know that we do not stand alone in the fight against evil. We have friends of Zion like you, each and every one of you, like the thousands of people who have assisted the Jewish nation during the last few generations, sometimes at the price of risking their own lives and the lives of their families. Friends of Zion, whose inspiring stories we can witness here in this place. I want to thank you again for your steadfast support for Israel, and I wish each and every one of you to grow from strength to strength. May God bless you. Ishar koach. Thank you all, and we hope to see you next year in Jerusalem.
Thank you, Sharon. I think making this Jerusalem prayer breakfast possible for you to attend is a fantastic achievement. Thank you, Mayan. Thank you, Sharon, one more time. Now I have a little surprise for you. I so much enjoyed Joel Rosenberg today, and I have a little extra here that, I mean, nobody can resist, because we have a moment to have a Q&A with a thriller speaker.
I'm just going to make things up, though.
Yeah, please,
so
go ahead.
As long as
this is your mic.
I'm honest, okay.
So I'm sure that you wanted to ask a question from Joel. You didn't dare or didn't have a chance to. So here you are. You can ask the question. Stand up and say it loud. Nobody. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to read your stories. I do read aloud with my children and grandchildren. Which one would you recommend I start with?
Well, it depends on ages, right? I mean, so I'm one of the few New York Times best-selling thriller writers that, you know, there's no graphic sexuality, there's no obscenity, but I compensate with violence, okay? So you just have to be age appropriate. We don't have any, you know, PG-13 or anything on the books. You just have to assess them yourselves. But parental guidance is suggested. Well, I'll tell you one book that I think, I used to say that people would say, what's your favorite book? And I would say, well, they're all my babies, my children. I don't want to take favorites, but that's not really true anymore. I realized, no, my favorite book is The Auschwitz Escape. It's the only novel I've ever written that is a piece of historical fiction, and it's actually inspired by 4 Jewish men that escaped from the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp in the spring of 1944. Now, there's a lot we don't know about those men, and so I read everything that I possibly could. I went to Yad Vashem. I met with their scholars. I met 3 of their 4 scholars that knew those men. One of them had written a foreword to his nonfiction book, so I learned a lot. They took me into the vault. I got to see the documents that they typed up of what they had seen, because the world didn't know what was happening in there. And so these were 4 eyewitnesses, and the reason they escaped was not just to save their own lives, which we would say dayenu, right? This alone would be enough. You had every right just to escape and save yourself. They didn't even escape just to tell the world of what had happened. That would have been a double dayenu, right? Like they would have been justified just to say, this is what has been happening. But they realized that the Jews of Hungary had not yet been brought there. And that the reason they were building the Birkenau expansion camp was so that all the Jews of Hungary could come and be exterminated in just weeks. And so they were trying to not only save their own lives and explain what had happened, they were trying to prevent more genocide from happening. Now, I wrote a thriller about this happening, and I submitted the first draft to the Yad Vashem leadership, and because I first asked them, I don't want to win the Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, award for, thinking that the Holocaust is fiction, right? I don't want to, maybe a novel is a bad idea. They said, no, even Holocaust survivors have used novels, all well-researched and sometimes their own stories, but to give them a little bit of distance and to make you emotionally feel as much as is possible for something that's unimaginable. That's how people learn. That's how people connect. Reading, a nonfiction book, a documentary, it's important. But we remember Schindler's List more than most of the books we've ever read about the Holocaust. Now, that was based on a true story, but it's dramatized, right? It's compressed so that you feel the emotion. And that's what I did with the Auschwitz escape. But they didn't like the first draft. Why? Because they said, you did all your research on the Jewish young man named Jacob, 17 years old, who's part of the resistance. He gets captured, sent to Auschwitz. Okay, he goes, that's a great storyline. You really nailed it. Aval, however, you have a pastor in this story, and these two escape together. He said, but your story, you're just making this up. You don't have any story. If you're going to write about the Holocaust, it has to be rooted in. So they said, go through our archives and find stories of Christians that were captured and sent to a concentration camp. And so I found the little town of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon. It's a little French town. I've been there now. I presented copies of the books to the leadership of the town. That town, the entire town, and the pastors, the Protestant pastors that were the pastors of that little church, they were all given righteous Gentile status by the state of Israel and by the Republic of France. It's an extraordinary story. That little town of 3,000 saved 5,000 Jews because they were on the train line and they realized what was happening and they rallied the whole town to protect Jews, to save Jews. And so they said, okay, now, once I said, how about this story? They said, yes, okay, now you're telling a story where once people read the novel, they will think, are these things true? I want to go learn what really happened. So the 4 men who really did escape from Auschwitz, they're in the story, but I have 2 other fictionalized characters. So I'm not fictionalizing the lives of the men that did it. I tell exactly how they got out. And right now we have a movie option on this, and we're developing this. We'll see. But I love that story. It's very graphic, but I've talked to parents who felt at whatever appropriate age for themselves and their kids. They said, this is the story that we have shown, we've let our kids read or we've read to them and walked them through it. And this is because Schindler's List is 30 years old. There are schools that aren't showing it anymore. There are, I'm not saying it's outdated, it's just we have to keep telling the story or our young people aren't going to get it. So, okay.
Great question. Any more questions, please? Bold people. The question is, were you surprised by the American reaction to the Gaza operation?
So break that out from the administration, from the media, from the church.
Right, from the media, and then what is the response? What should the church be
saying? He's raising specifically the question of how did the media handle the war? I'm schizophrenic in my answer to the media part first, then we'll talk about the church. Because on the one hand, I just find myself stunned all over again. Like, you've got to be kidding me. I mentioned at the Knesset yesterday I think they are, and I'm trying to narrow down just the 10 worst examples of the media bias in that war. But, you know, I've got more to choose from. So I haven't written the story for All Israel News yet, but maybe next week I'll just try to pick 10 and just go with it, right? But maybe the number one worst one was the Washington Post op-ed that said that, yes, the Iron Dome is allowing Israelis to protect themselves, but thus it is enabling the Israeli government to be more violent and more aggressive because there's no consequences. This is freaking anti-Semitism in the worst case. Now you're not even allowed to defend yourself without being guilty? This stuff is insane. So at one level, this is why we started this site. So this is why we're doing this. This is, you know, this is why you gather, not just because you love Israel, but because you see Israel under attack everywhere. It's not just the rockets. The rockets have stopped. The lies have not stopped flying. And this is what Sharon Regev is talking about. And she's saying, like most Israeli leaders, we need your help. We are a small nation and a small people. Some of us are very small, but the Christian world of 600 million evangelicals, or even just in the United States, 60 million, or just the Christians United for Israel with John Hagee, who's landing as we speak, 10 million? Like, that's, you know, John Hagee has as many people in that organization as the entire country of Israel. So, of course, we need to educate and mobilize, and that's what we're doing. So I am both not surprised, because this is what I've grown up with. I'm 54. I was born 2 months before the Six-Day War, and this is everything I've known all the way. And yet I find myself just continually horrified. Like, this can't be. They can't actually be saying this. So now the church is more painful, because you have to remember, you all are in the minority of the evangelical movement worldwide, of the Christian movement. Let's say, I think, look, we've also done a lot of extensive polling on evangelical views. And I won't get into all those details right now, but one of the nonprofits I founded is called the Joshua Fund, and we help fund things to help educate Christians. We do humanitarian relief and strengthening pastors and churches and so forth. But in this area, for the education side, we did fund a massive benchmark survey in the late 2017. We released it at the National Press Club. And this is a precursor to what Luke was just sharing on the more recent data. But we did a much larger survey. Why? So we could compare what young people think important, but we wanted to literally compare apples to apples to what their parents think and what their grandparents think. And so what I'm saying is, the church, the American evangelical church, overwhelmingly loves Israel, the evangelicals. But if you look at Christendom, the pro-Israel, the love for Israel component is actually the minority. And this is a problem. I was actually going to mention it, but I was running out of time, and I didn't want, I didn't want Albert to come and, pull me off the stage, and there's other important people speaking, But, for example, the Roman Catholic Church, historically, our team, the Jewish team, has had a problem with the supersessionism and so forth. But there has been great progress, okay? Particularly on the issues of anti-Semitism, right, of Christ-killer language, right? That they have course-corrected. And again, where somebody does something right, we need to encourage it. And I think what we need to do is we need to reach out more, in fact, including Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, Christian Media Summit. We need to reach out more to the Vatican specifically, but Roman Catholic Church leaders around the world, because we can also get ourselves in a bubble. The Roman Catholics, that's a much larger movement than evangelicals. And there's progress, not enough. But again, you make common cause. You don't have to, okay, we're not going to agree on the theology of Mary, okay, or other issues. Okay, we got multiple things we got to work with. But when we're dealing specifically with this, we don't want to lead. Look, let me put it this way. If I'm willing to go build friendships with Arab Muslim leaders, I think that my Roman Catholic brothers and sisters are people I ought to be building relationships with too. I haven't done it yet. I need to. That's on me. So, but I would encourage all of us to think, what more can we do? Maybe our friends in Italy can be helpful on that front. And then there are other, swaths. I'll give you one more example. This was very interesting to me. So, much of Reformed theology, Protestant Reformed theology, right, in the United States or around the world, does not focus on Israel. Right? And within some sectors, it is supersessionism, but others it's just light. They don't talk about it. That means their young people aren't understanding the whole counsel of God from Genesis to Revelation, right? If you just teach in your church creation, fall, redemption, and return, well, that's all true. You just knocked out all of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Israel's story. So it's not that you would be a bad evangelical, but you wouldn't understand God's heart, plan, purpose for Israel, not just for Israel and the Jews, but Paul keeps talking about look to Israel as a model. Sometimes for what we shouldn't do, but sometimes for what we should. I mean, so there's no richness there. That's what our young people are missing. They're missing the actual biblical narrative from the beginning to the end. So if you don't have it, you can't act on it. So all that to say, again, I realize I keep praying, Lord, would you open doors for me to go meet with MBS, MBZ, CC, King Abdullah? And God, you're answering those prayers. How come I'm not asking to go meet John Piper? So I started praying. I'd like to meet John Piper. And I love John Piper's teaching, but in the area of Israel, he doesn't see it. But should I be mad at him, attack him, or should I go visit him? So I got invited. So what did I do? I actually invited him to come to Egypt with me. I thought, let's not start with Israel. Let's start with the neighbors. John Piper, come with me to Egypt. We're going to go meet President Sisi. We're going to meet the church leaders in Egypt. Unfortunately, he couldn't come, but he asked, could the president and vice president of my Bible college and seminary, could they come instead? Absolutely. We had an amazing time in Egypt. And then we had such a good time that these two gentlemen said, would you like to come and teach for a few days at the school? Yes, I would. Okay. So I went and we had dinner. And I don't want to go on and on, but I want to say we had a lovely dinner with the senior leadership of Bethlehem College and Seminary, including John and Noel Piper. And I have tremendous respect for them and have learned so much from them. Okay, there's some areas I disagree. But mostly he doesn't talk about it, so I guess I'd prefer people I don't agree with to not talk about it than to teach things that are wrong. But we had an amazing conversation. And just to wrap that up, it's an ongoing discussion with him, with his team. Look, we can't write off swaths of Christendom because they don't see it the way we do. And I said to him specifically this, but I say it to us, to me, I say it. Romans chapter 10, what does Paul say about people who don't yet know Jesus as the Messiah? He says, how will they believe if they haven't heard? How will they hear if nobody tells them? Well, how will anyone tell them unless somebody gets sent, trained, encouraged, funded with you know the story. So I said to John, listen, when it comes to this whole issue of God's love for Jewish people, even if you disagree with me, and he does, that current Israel is biblically, prophetically significant. He thinks it's interesting, but he doesn't see it as connected to the prophecies. But he's not against Israel, but he doesn't see this as special, but he certainly loves Israel and he loves the Jewish people. I said, okay, but you never talk about it, John. And so how will your young people that listen to you and have such a regard for your biblical teaching, how will they know to love Israel and the Jewish people unless you teach it? And and so I'm not really in a position to send you off to do it, but I'm asking you, I've heard what you said. You do love Jewish people, and you love the scriptures. So would you give some thought to, what can you say that you believe? And how do we not drop Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob out of the story? So this is what we need to do. We need to engage every sector, every segment of Christendom And I'm optimistic. Look, I get it. It's not everybody's going to do somersaults and go, woohoo, I'm coming to Israel and I'm in. But I will tell you one more thing about John Piper. He told me that his parents came to take a tour in the early 70s. And tragically, a group of drunk Israeli soldiers, their Jeep veered off the road, hit the tour bus head on, and his mother was killed here in the land. He said, that's not why I've never come, but there's something in his heart that has pain. And that may or may not have any significance, except that it doesn't make it easier for him to come. But what we need to do is build friendships and be okay with not agreeing with everything. Okay, that's a long, extended DVD answer. And I saw Hananya come in, so now I've done what I think I need to do. Is that? Okay. Well, I'll do whatever you're the boss. I'm here. I'm here to serve, not to be served.
This is fantastic.
Okay.
I mean, to listen to you is just such a joy, because Joel, you are such a inspiration, uplifting speaker, motivational, not just that.
Especially this time of day, it's rough. I mean, God bless you, Hananya, or whatever, I don't know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I would, thank you, thank you, Joel. Thank you so much. Hananya, may I ask you to come to the stage? Hananya is a very unusual young man. I remember you telling me that you were, hi.
Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you again. I remember you were telling me how shy you were about talking on the media, making a short video clip. And then comes the Gaza war, and you are there in the uniform, and you start to post clips on the YouTube. What made you do this?
True. Well, does this thing work?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, first of all, it's awesome to be here and to listen to what Joel had said. And yeah, before we begin to talk about that, I just have to say that while coming here, there was something burning inside of my Israeli heart that I just had to say. And it's that nothing, and I repeat this, nothing will ever break the alliance between the Jews and the Christians. It doesn't matter who is president, it doesn't matter who is prime minister, because our alliance does not stem from the earth. We pray to the same God, the God of Israel, the God that sees everything, the God that controls everything, but most importantly, He loves both of us. And I think that that's just amazing to be able to, be here with Christian brothers and sisters. And you're right, I used to be actually very shy. I used to be the kind of guy that would, sit over there in the back. I didn't want the teacher to approach me, to talk to me. But that changed because I was an Idf soldier in the Armored Corps. And shortly after I finished my advanced trainings, I found myself inside the Gaza Strip. Hamas started to fire rockets at Israel. Same old mantra, firing rockets at Israel. Israel is blamed for that. But this time I was inside the Gaza Strip. I was fighting Hamas alongside my brothers in arms. And I was honestly angry to see how the media was treating us, Israelis, because I was an IDF soldier. I was given the commands. When you join the IDF, the first thing that you are given is not a weapon. The first thing that they teach you is not how to shoot a gun. They first give you a small booklet it's called the Idf Code of Ethics. You first learn how to behave. You first learn how to be a human being. And only then you learn how to defend your country. That's how it begins. And so, we would come back to Israel from the Gaza Strip. I would see the news embracing Israel, loving Israel. I'm kidding, obviously. So I said, you know what? When things are calm, I'm going to start and speak up for my country. My English, I was born and raised in Israel, in Upper Galilee, so English is not my first language. So I had to, and I didn't know how to edit videos, so I just said, you know what, that's my passion, I'll start doing it.
So that was 2014?
Yeah, 2014.
And suddenly your videos become viral. I'm telling Jake all the time, make my videos viral. You know, hit that button, okay?
True.
I mean, so what button did you hit? Why in the world did your videos become viral?
Well, it's a secret. I'm not going to share this, but no, I'm kidding. Honestly, there's no recipe to a viral video. I think that people connected to that Israeli, to that human being, because I didn't speak on behalf of anyone but myself, my personal experience as an IDF soldier who fought to defend my country, who lost friends. And obviously, there's one important thing to say. No soldier enjoys being over there. You know, you think that our troops prefer to be on the border rather than at home? Obviously not. But it's just shameful that Israel always needs to defend itself not only physically against terror groups, but also on media outlets. And I think that that's something, you know, you're talking about viral videos. The videos that I made was not apologizing. I don't need to apologize for defending my country. That's absurd. Why do Israel needs to apologize for defending itself, you know?
And so, I mean, I know that we have Indonesian friends online and people from Australia and Malaysia, and I hope soon the Americans will wake up and they will see what we are talking here about. But suddenly your videos are reaching everywhere, and in my opinion, most importantly, even the Prime Minister's office.
True, true.
So how did that happen?
Well, you know, I had this dream years ago. I think it was right when I finished my military service, to make a video with the Prime Minister, because he was the ambassador to the UN. So in my opinion, I learned a lot from him, how to defend Israel, and it was my dream. So I made that dream happen, and well, what do you know? Months later, he asked me to join the digital team. So that's something absolutely incredible.
So you somehow reached out to him and said, I want to make a video with you? Is that the story?
You know, in Hebrew we call it chutzpah.
I know that.
That's what we call it. Yeah.
That's
you know,
that's chutzpah of
if
chutzpah.
if you don't dare, you'll not make it. You know.
Sure. So you went to Prime Minister's office. I mean, nobody goes to Prime Minister's office.
Yeah, well, I contacted one of the advisors. Yeah, nowadays, you know, you don't go to the door. You can text them.
Smart. So you make a video with Netanyahu, and you end up working with him.
True.
So that's quite an interesting story. I mean, we had a Supreme Court justice here from Michigan. He spoke about his dreams and his struggle through the pain. But I mean, I think it is so fascinating that you can dream a dream and then, you know, prophesy your own story and then go and live it.
Absolutely. It's something that, you know, I think that this is a great lesson to all of us, that I'm still learning as well, that, you know, you can always achieve whatever dream you have, you know. You are your own limit.
Now
Nothing else can.
You're really intriguing me now here, and I think
so. That regards viral videos as well. You know?
It's fantastic. Now I'm thinking about Joseph and his story. You know, he had also chutzpah to stand, you know, before Pharaoh and prophesy his own work description, and then say, well, here, you know, you need a man for the job.
Well, that's true. That's
and
true.
I think he did his job well. And you have been doing an extremely, fantastically great job. Can you tell a little bit more about what is your day-to-day life about?
Yeah, well, actually, you know, obviously defending Israel is a passion of mine. And that's why, you know, as an Israeli, I was born and raised here, as I've said previously. And as an Israeli, it warms my heart. It honestly makes me want to cry when I get messages from Christians all over the world that, you know, they say, hey, you know, I pray for you. I pray for your country. You know, what Hamas is doing is not okay. But, you know, to see people miles away, kilometers away, praying for Israel, praying for this tiny country, you know, I think that I can speak on behalf of Israelis that it warms our hearts. And to see this friendship happening is just incredible, and it honestly encourages me to make more of it. I'll tell you a little bit, in case you guys aren't familiar. I'm basically making videos. I realize that, nowadays, social media is where people come, argue, share their thoughts and opinions. On social media nowadays, you can see a lot of anti-Israel activists trying to hijack these platforms. Especially, we had a TikTok problem. People posting videos of them, like Arabs, anti-Israel activists, posting videos of themselves burning the flags of Israel. And I can tell you personally that when Israel signed a peace treaty with the UAE, I'm a privileged Israeli, so I was like, let's drive to Jerusalem, to Harmona Natziv, hold the flag of the UAE and say, welcome to Jerusalem. I can't wait to see you guys in Jerusalem. A lot of people who are watching.
We actually have somebody from Dubai here.
So, that's awesome.
So yeah, you are talking to a right crowd.
Yeah. So I posted that video on TikTok, welcoming the peace with the UAE. And what do you know? They took it down and banned my TikTok. I fought back. Us Israelis, we're fighting back. We're not apologizing. So I managed to get it back. But nowadays, I basically make videos about Israel. I'm very happy that it's reaching. I think during the last conflict, we talked about this. I was able to reach over 90 million people, and that's just incredible. But still not enough.
Yeah, well, I know that. Yeah, I remember during this conflict. I mean, I'm your big fan. You know that.
I'm your big fan.
Well, thank you. So I'm following you on Instagram, and I'm getting your posts, and I mean they're so good. I'm sending it forward. I'm forwarding them to other people. I mean, how? Maybe I'm not so effective in this. Maybe I should do something much better. But again, I think that your greatest advantage is that you are a step ahead of media, a step ahead even of events. I like it.
Well, I try to keep it that way. I try to keep it that way. But honestly, it's something that's incredible because I always say this. Yes, I am biased because I'm an Israeli. Back in 1939, and even before that, they used to say, Jews, go back to Palestine, leave Europe. We did that. We came back home. But nowadays, they say, Jews, leave Palestine, go back to where you came from. Well, you know what? We don't have another place. If my land is burning, I'm going to defend it because I have nowhere else to go. We are back home, and we're not going anywhere. And, that's, we're talking about speaking up for Israel, but it's really you. You guys are the real ambassadors of Israel wherever you go. And it's not ambassador of Israel. It's not representing Israel. It's simply representing the truth. Because, guys, by defending Israel, you defend and secure your future. Because I've said it previously that, these terrorists are knocking on our borders. But if we don't stop them, you think that they'll stop here? Obviously not. Obviously not. They are radical. They're radical Islamists that, their greatest ambition is to establish a worldwide nation. So by stopping them, we basically make sure that your security is also, you are safe. So by standing up for Israel, you stand up for your own security. And, it makes you ambassadors of the truth, standing on the right side of history.
So, Hanania, I mean, I'm looking at your posts. I mean, you're exposing this story with a baby that is a Russian model.
True.
and she's not dead. She's happily alive in Moscow. They claimed she's dead. And I think like you have a staff of 100 people working for you, doing the
midgets,
research.
Yeah, midgets. No, I'm kidding.
No, research and finding all of these facts. And then you just say, well, I like this clip, edit it this way a little bit, and then you say to another one, yeah, you just, you missed it a little bit here, but let's just rephrase it. Is that the reality you're facing?
No, unfortunately, I'm doing everything by myself. So, well, I love it. When you do something that you love, so you just want to do more of it. And it's just incredible. It's incredible to be able to share the truth. Because, I always say that. You mentioned that Russian girl. On social media, it's so easy to distort the truth and to portray Israel as the aggressor and them as the victims. It's true, Israel is strong. It's true that we have the means to defend ourselves. But, I understand them, the anti-Israel activists, that they, that perhaps they want us to give Hamas Iron Dome, maybe a few jets, fighter jets, maybe a few tanks. But do they really expect us to cooperate with that? We have the means to defend ourselves against terrorism. And, I have to say this, that it's not hard to do this. You simply have to take the truth and share it. That's so easy. It's like the truth is right in front of you. You don't need to think, oh, how am I going to distort the facts now? How am I going to flip this story? It's easy. That's all you have to do.
I loved that video when there is a funeral procession and suddenly there is sirens going off. Oh. You posted it, and then the dead guy gets up and flees to the shelter. That was good.
Well, it's the thing. I want to go back to that fake news that they're posting about. It's that they posted a picture of a Russian girl. They claimed her as their own, and they said they even gave her a name, and they said she died in Israeli airstrikes. And well, what do you know? She is alive and in Russia. She was a Russian child model. So you have all these kinds of fake news that you have to deal with. And I want to say that it breaks my heart as well when I see Palestinian civilians dying. Does the world think that we're happy about it? Of course not. It breaks my heart because I don't want them to suffer. They're not suffering because of us. They're suffering because of Hamas. They're suffering under a dictatorship. You can guess yourselves what's going to happen to a Palestinian in Gaza that will stand up to Hamas. I'm telling you, they will not live much longer if they do that.
Well, another thing that I love about you is that you have such a great heart and ability in dealing with vicious haters. I mean, you get so much hateful, responses, and you just, smile and you say, well, we actually love you, Iranians, and what can we do to help you?
Well, Iranian people are amazing people. That's number one. You have to distinguish between the Islamic regime and the Iranian people. But with that hatred that I'm getting, it simply motivates me more. Because I'm saying, I'm reaching the same exact people. Obviously, it's good to strengthen our allies and our friends. But when I get hate, I'm like, right on. Bring some more, because it motivates me to do even a greater job at this, because I want them to know that I don't hate them. I want them to know that I do want peace. And I can actually tell you that I once got a message, but it's between us. I once got a message from an Egyptian student. He told me that he wanted to come to Israel via Jordan and stab Jews. I was like, okay, let's continue and read the message, hoping that it's a positive one. And he continues and he writes me that he bumped onto one of the videos that I made on social media, and it changed his opinion. He wrote me word by word, his words. I thought that Israelis are monsters, but I see that you are not the monsters I thought you were. And I think that this tells you the impact that you can do. It's not me, it's us together. As we're stronger when we are together. And it just tells you that a lot of people in the Middle East don't know what's happening in Israel. They don't know what's happening. Who are the Israelis? I got a message from someone from the Emirates that they said, thank you for explaining what's happening on Temple Mount, because I thought that it's the Israeli police that's simply storming into Al-Aqsa Mosque for fun. So you really need to put the truth and the facts out there. It's not that hard.
Well, you really do it well. And again, how can well, there's another thing I was thinking about. You mentioned a video you made about the Temple Mount. How many likes did you get? How many people watched it?
I think in Well, on Instagram, over 3 million, but maybe in total, 5 million.
But then was somebody else who like made a response to that, or how was the story?
They did. Well, I basically, you guys heard about what's happening on Temple Mount. These clashes between the police and Palestinian radicals. And so I decided to make a video about that, to explain the world that, hey, our police is not storming mosques for fun. Our police is storming into the mosque. And, I'm saying that after I spoke with friends who were on the Temple Mount during that time. And they said, Hanania, we don't storm into the mosque unless we have to, unless there is no other option. And, these radicals, I basically made that video. I was saying that, you have these radicals that throw stones at our police. Then they run to hide inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. So you're basically committing 2 crimes. You're desecrating a holy site, because it's a holy site to the Jews, to Christians, and to Muslims. And you're basically desecrating your own mosque. And secondly, you're committing a crime by, attacking the police. So what do you expect, that you could hide there from the police? So I explained that in the video. And, someone else made a response to that video saying, don't let this guy fool you. Yes, we store stones in Al-Aqsa Mosque. Yes, we do that. But you have guns, you have this and that. There's an ongoing war right now. It's not on the Gaza border. It's on your phones. All you have to do is just open the app, and it's over there. So, that's why I'm always saying that we need to be united. Jews, Christians, Muslims, because after all, we are human beings, and supporting Israel is supporting our security. And that's why it's very important.
So how can people follow you? What is the best way? I mean, you mentioned Instagram. How do they go? Hanania, and then they find you? Hanania Naftali?
Yeah, I wasn't that original, so, I went by my name. It's Hanania Naftali. Yeah, on Instagram, it's Age Naftali. So, yeah, that's how I basically do it.
Most of it's on Instagram or any other?
I try to be everywhere. Oh. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, because I think that since we are at constant war, unfortunately, then, you have to really fight. I fought Hamas in Gaza. Now I fight the lies on the media, on social media. And it's very much vital.
Right. I mean, we need somebody who is really able to intercept, like Iron Dome intercepts. It's like,
true.
Like videos, intercepting videos, or whatever you call it. So I think you should have a master class or something, how to create those videos. I mean,
I would love that.
Yeah, Luke Bray here is talking about bringing thousands of Christian students, college students to Israel. I mean, think of, having a few hours with kids and how to make your viral videos. No, maybe it's not that one, but again,
viral videos are my secret. I'm not going to tell you, Albert. I'm sorry.
I know.
But no, I actually think that this is very, very vital. And I spoke with my friend Joel, who was here before. I spoke with him a while ago, and we talked about the importance of this alliance, because nowadays you have these millennials in the U.S., in Europe. They don't know what's going on. When I was in Europe, a friend of mine, I was in Germany, and a friend of mine was telling me, our generation starts to not care that much about Israel. They're saying, like the millennials are saying, well, he's supporting Israel for the old ones. We're the new generation. Well, I'm part of the new generation, and I'm telling you that it's so important to support Israel, and that's why I really think that it would be a great idea to encourage more Christians around the world to do the same.
Hanania, thank you so much for coming today, sharing.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
I want you to do another thing. Please tell our Prime Minister that we've been praying for him here in the Knesset, here while in the Friends of Zion Museum, and that we are very proud of how he has led Israel into a great success. Is a great leader. So thank you so much for serving our country, serving our Prime Minister, and May God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is a fantastic expert concerning the Middle East. Should I switch here? And Dr. Nir Boms was with us here last year and spoke about the new Middle East emerging, speaking about the changes that are taking place around us. Today, his theme is Finding Abraham Again, a context to the deal of the century. Nir, you are always an exciting speaker. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. And please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very, very much. Hello to everyone joining here and elsewhere. Can I get my PowerPoint on, if you can? Friends, about 11 years ago, almost to the day, I find myself in Egypt. Sitting in Cairo, this is the beginning of what is about to be the Arab Spring. And a bunch of us are sitting in a cafe. And we have one of those conversations. What will happen now? Can the Middle East change? Will we find Abraham? And as we're having this conversation that lasts for a while, we hear an interesting exchange taking place on the table right next to us. There is a gentleman there. He's calling the waiter and says, "Asmah ya habibi, excuse me, my friend. You know, it's summer, it's very, very hot. Can you turn the air conditioner on?" "Wallah ya habibi, fish mushkila." The waiter tells him with a very famous Egyptian smile, "Not a problem, we'll turn the air conditioner on for you." We continue the dialogue for another few minutes, and then we hear something interesting. He calls the waiter again and says, "Excuse me, I hate to bother you again. It's getting too cold. Can you turn the air conditioner off?" And he says, "Wallah habibi, fish mushkila," the same smile. We continue with our conversation, but 10 minutes later, the same thing happens again. He calls the waiter, "Can you turn the air conditioner on?" And 10 minutes later, he calls him again, "Can you turn the air conditioner off?" Until next time the waiter comes to us, we tell him, "Wallah habibi, should we say something to this gentleman over there? Obviously, he's driving you crazy." And the waiter gives us the same very nice smile, "Fish mushkila, not a problem. Why do you think he's driving me crazy?" Because we tell them, "How can you turn on and off the air conditioner every 10 minutes? And he tells us, "I don't think you understand. We don't even have air conditioning here." Soon thereafter, the Arab Spring begins. And I get myself reminded of this story. Why? Because it teaches something very interesting. What you see is not always what you get, certainly when it comes to the Middle East. And in the Middle East, the power of perception sometimes is greater than the power of the truth. We just heard Hanania, we just heard, so many things in the last year. So many of us are speaking about fake news and what's happening over there. And I am going to speak a little bit about the Abraham Accords and changing the paradigm. Look, my friends, we have two conflicts in the Middle East. There is one that we speak a lot about, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But if we are going a little bit further away, we also see something that's called the Israeli-Arab conflict. These are related. I think for too many years, many people thought they're almost the same, but they're not. We are somewhat stuck with the Palestinian file. We're not going to spend a lot of time about that. But something had happened here. And it didn't happen just with the Abraham Accords. It started with this air-conditioned story in Egypt. It started in the last 10 years. And what had happened here is a realization of what is happening here. If you're now sitting in Dubai, if you're now sitting in the Gulf, and you're observing what is happening around you, my friends, Beirut is on fire. Baghdad is attacked by missiles from Iran. Cairo is hungry. Damascus is occupied again by the Iranians. And if you're sitting there in the Gulf, you're looking at all of this and says, "Look, I've seen the fire, I've seen the storm. The last thing I want is for this to come my way. I need to change the discourse. I need to reorient." What I want to argue with you today is that the Abraham Accords and what is happening is something broader than just another normalization piece between Israel and the Middle East. It's a part of a much broader compass call that engulfs the entire region and that comes from the place, the Gulf, is becoming more interesting. Because if you follow Arab history, if you're an Arab intellectual and you needed to have a voice, you would speak historically from Damascus, or from Cairo, or from Baghdad, or later on from Beirut. Today, if you want to say something of meaning, you can speak from the Gulf. Partially because the other places, I told you where they are, and partially because if you want to speak on a video channel or on a newspaper, they are probably going to own it. So therefore, my friends, the Middle East has changed in the last 10 years. This is the last picture from from before the Arab Spring. These are the people that you may know. Mubarak, Gaddafi, Ben Ali, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya. These are the people who symbolize the Middle East. They were the ones we used to. They were supposed to be there forever. They were there for 4 decades. And if it's not them, it's supposed to be their children. But look, they're not there. And what is happening is that all of a sudden the region is beginning to change its priorities. When you ask in the middle of all of this, when you ask the Arab young person, and there have been surveys on this, what's important to you? What are you afraid of? They'll tell you, you know what? I'm afraid of radicalization. We've had a few years when we've heard a lot about the Islamic State. All of a sudden, they're able to take some parts of Iraq and some parts of Syria. God forbid if they're going to come to us. This is my fear. So I'm worried about the radicalization. I'm worried about Islamic extremism. And then I begin to worry a little bit about other things like economy and my job and my prospects. And then when I'm getting all of that, I'm beginning to worry about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You see how low it is on the list. It's no longer number 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And in the region, the priorities have shifted completely. The same, it's a new generation. These are new people. The Middle East, in about 2 decades, had gained over 150 million people. This is a region that's growing. This is a region that has more children than Africa. But the young people, particularly the more educated one, just like many others, just like your children, what they want, it's about me. It's not about just big ideologies that we used to have. No, I want to be self-fulfilled. I want to live my life. And you know what? If I want to live my life, I need to have an environment that will allow me to live my life. And if I'm going to be under Daesh, under the Islamic State, under a city that's burned, that's not so good for self-fulfillment. And so what we're seeing here is a region that is on the verge of change. And then a few other things are happening. The Abraham Accords do not rest just on an alliance, security alliance with Iran. It's maybe a part of it, but there are a few other pieces of it. First of all, we had a Jewish community there. They were a little underground, but they existed and they helped to serve as a bridge. The connections with the Gulf are older than 2 decades. We had people there. If you may even remember, there was an interesting operation by an unknown security organization that took a Hamas senior operative in one of these countries. And they found out. But how did they find out? Because they had security cameras. Who installed the security cameras? The same people a decade before. That's what happened there. Over 500 Israeli companies have been in the Gulf before the Abraham Accords happened. One of my friends said, look, we were doing for years, I was involved in some of these meetings, all these track 2, under-the-table meetings. At some point, it began to be a little too crowded under the table. So at some degree, we had to take it out. So we're talking about the business cooperation, the Jewish community, the security cooperation. Of course, there was an understanding, by the way, that there are 2 threats. Iran on the one hand, Islamic radicalization on the other. These are the people that in 2014 and 2015 say that the Muslim Brotherhood, here we know them more as Hamas, are a terrorist organization. They have designated in the United States a number of dozens of organizations that are affiliated with CARE and others because they are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. They said, this is not the Islam we want. We want something different. So then what we see is an increased number of engagements. Israelis and Saudis begin to meet. This is a report by economists from all across the region talking about, let's see what will happen if one day we'll be able to find an economic zone and collaborate, because we can actually get people work. We can actually get people to be more prosperous. And then you see that we have occasionally new resolutions against boycott, and of course many of you understand something about the BDS movement, and all of a sudden Bahrain says, wait a minute, before the Abraham Accords, perhaps not, perhaps we're not supporting this. And then you see Prime Minister Netanyahu in a surprise visit of Oman, and then you see that Hatikva is played in a sports competition just because the Israeli actor actually ended up winning. Okay, so it is in the UAE, so what? And all of these things are happening before the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt saying that we no longer wish to reject the idea of normalization with Israel. Look, let's look at the region for a second, and I'll give you two perspectives. Let's look at the red axis, the axis of threats. What do we see here? You hear about this. We see terrorists everywhere. From Yemen, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas. We see them in Sinai, we see them in Lebanon. Iran is trying to encircle us. You've probably heard a lot about this. Al-Qaeda on the Sunni side, of Hamas radicalization, Iran on the Shia side. And this is an axis of threat. Jordan may be burst. Syria is a failed state. Lebanon is controlled by Hezbollah. But let's take the same region in a different perspective and take a look at the last piece of this, the economic bump, with a potential 100 million unemployed. Because sure, I have the dangers here, and I have the difficult dots, but I can look at this differently. Because the same enemies that are the enemies of Israel are shared by a number of other countries, certainly when it comes to the Gulf. There are destabilizer actors, Qatar that supports the Muslim Brotherhood, Iran, Turkey, and then some of these terrorist organizations that I mentioned. But there are stabilizing factors, people who see the world in a similar way, just like us. They are afraid of Iran on the one hand, they are afraid of the Sunni radical groups, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, on the other hand. So all of a sudden you realize that we see the world in a bit of a similar fashion. And we also understand something very simple. If we continue to burn ourselves to death, first of all, we have more death. Second, we're not going to be able to have prosperity, individualism, self-fulfillment. And if you go to Dubai and if you read a little bit of the history of the Emirates, you'll see that they have a year of tolerance. You see that in the last couple of years, all of a sudden, women are able to drive in Saudi Arabia. You see that there's some opening. Why there is some opening? Not just because times have changed. Because there is a realization that the way to fight the radical ideology is to finding a different ideology. And a different ideology is about tolerance, peace, and prosperity. The idea that tolerance can bring to peace and peace can bring to prosperity. And prosperity can bring young people to fulfill themselves and to live happily. But the other side is about setting everything on fire. So we're going to fight it in two ways. We're going to fight it together. Intelligence cooperation, security cooperation, Iran, and you've seen that even these countries are joining even some of the military coalitions with the West, with the Americans. That's part of the war. But the second part of the war is the ideological war. We're going to challenge the way Islam looks like. We're going to challenge the radicals. We're going to challenge the idea that, as was even done recently in Saudi Arabia, that the version of Islam that represents all of this is valid. Because we have people who still say it's valid and use that to kill themselves and blow themselves. We see them here all the time. And then you have finally some people from the other side who are saying, wait a minute, let's look at this differently. So all of a sudden, the Palestinian issue is it's not so important. There are other more important issues. With all the respect to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, anyone of you know how many Palestinians were killed here since 1948? One of the Syrian friends once commented, the number is close to 20,000. It's a very big number, but this is what happened in Syria's conflict in 1 month. In 1 month, in a conflict that killed in the last decade close to 1 million people. Part of the problem is that we have a conflict here that makes a lot of noise, hardly bleeds, and then everybody can go and tackle it. But some of the friends in the region say, let's put everything in perspective. It's not so important. And now I move into the Abraham Accords. And if you read the language of the Abraham Accord, you will find something interesting there. There is not country that is mentioned there. It's not a regular or generic peace between two countries. It's something more interesting, and this is why others could join. It's a concept. It's a vision. It's a compass call. It's about the idea that we want to join a vision, a shared vision that takes this idea that tolerance can bring to peace, that can bring to prosperity. This is where we want to go. This is where we want to take the region. And from there, what you see is things that are a bit more positive than what we've seen here in the past few weeks. Because you've seen real engagement. You've seen flags together. You've seen Zoom calls together. You've seen the first kosher factory located in not so far away from Dubai. You've seen people who are willing to come together, speak publicly about the fact that we are about to change the Middle East. We used to have, and I used to work in Washington, I used to come to diplomatic meetings, and I speak to some people from the region, and I say, hello, I'm coming from Israel. So, no, God forbid, I will shake your hand. But what we're seeing now is very different. I'm almost every day, I got my phone call is 971, 972, 973, Bahrain, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates. Calls from Oman, calls from here, calls from there. Why? Because they are willing to do this publicly, and they're willing to do it with people to people. The first time, when I was there, just a couple of months ago, a Holocaust exhibit in the United Arab Emirates. A beautiful one. And it was amazing to be there for the Holocaust Memorial Day of the Israeli one, when it was inaugurated. And also, all of a sudden, the Jewish community is able to move from under the table to over the table. And you know what? They didn't know what's coming. All of a sudden, in 1 month, 75,000 Israeli tourists came to visit them. How many Shabbat dinners you need to have for all of that? But that's another very interesting thing. And I'll share with you a moment, if you can play that little film. Does it work? Well, if it doesn't work, this is as they were trying to fix it over there on that side. This is just a film of one of the very first planes that have landed here. So many heart-warm moments that have taken place. If it's not working, just move to the next one. And look, we have just been through a difficult time. I know you've heard probably a lot about what had happened here in the last few weeks, and these are some of the pictures that has to do with perhaps the very first test of the Abraham Accords. Because if you remember, when it all started, part of the deal was for the Emiratis have said, and the others said, look, we are trying to do this because we believe it's going to be better for the region. It's also going to be better for the Palestinians. We will be able to bring some degree of stability. Annexation was put off the table, and all of a sudden, the country is in flames. Gaza, Hamas shooting, the entire Arab world is full with all those very, very horrible pictures. And some people have told me, okay, Nir, what's going to happen with the Abraham Accords? Is this going to survive it? If you see on the left part of the picture, there is a pilot, a very famous pilot, a hero. That's an Emirati hero, and she was attacked. Why? Because they told her, you participated in the Hamas bombing, free of the IDF around Gaza. Of course, got nothing to do with it, but this is part of what was done. They were under attack. You know what? We were in daily contact. In daily contact with WhatsApp groups, with briefings. People were trying to understand what is going on here. It was not an easy time. But last week, they just opened a new embassy here. The flag was there. On Sunday, I'm going to host another delegation that is coming from there. We have launched a number of other projects since then. Why? Because what I've told you so far potentially had passed the test. Because it's not about the Palestinians. And also more so, because there's also an understanding and that what we are seeing here and what Hamas was involved with, Hamas, a part of the Muslim Brotherhood, is not the line that we want to back up or promote. This is not the line that promotes radicalization. This is not the line that promotes people shooting missiles at civilians. This is the line that promotes peace and tolerance. So therefore, you see that the embassy is opened, and really, this is one of my favorite pictures. Yes, my friends, this is an old picture, because what I'm arguing with you is that what we're seeing here is a new Middle East. And I hope that some of this will give you a perspective of why this is important, and I hope that some of this will give you a sense of why it passed the very first test. I hope that many of you will be able to visit this place. I've seen very wonderful moments, moments of connections. I'm now in touch, actually, with some of the leadership of the church, some of the churches over there who have asked us to engage with them on an interreligious dialogue with the Jewish community and with the Muslim community. There's an understanding that we can now do things and can do things in the open that we have not done elsewhere. So for me, it's a sign of hope. And by the way, every time when somebody tells me, how can you be optimistic in the Middle East after a war, after Gaza, I tell them, look, I was born here, I'm Israeli. My national anthem is hope. So with this, I hope I can leave you, and thank you very much.
That was an excellent line in the ending. Our anthem is actually hope. You know, we last year when you were with us here, we had our friends from Dubai watching, and your presentation was the top popular presentation. And we have actually a few friends from Dubai here today, Desmond and Rob and others. And, you know, because of what you said, in November, we flew to Dubai last year. And it was absolutely fabulous time there. We met with the church leaders, and we found that Israel actually has so many friends there. So thank you for opening our eyes. Thank you for showing us the new picture, the new photo of the new Middle East. And you're really helping us to understand the paradigm shift that is taking place, that is not in the news. Nir, you're doing an excellent job. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Albert.
Privilege that you are with us. And I hope that many thousands of people that were watching us today will find a lot of encouragement and hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, it is really amazing to get some new thoughts, some new ideas, to see that things can actually develop in a direction that is positive. Isn't it fantastic? So our next panel will be a panel of Israeli experts, Israeli influencers. Actually, we did this a few weeks ago here in the same Friends of Zion Museum. Israeli influencers talk, making sense of the latest Israel-Hamas conflict. So I would encourage our viewers to keep on watching and enjoying our great time. At 6, we will have our live broadcast from the Founders' Dinner. Thank you. Panel of experts that will share their insights and will help you to find the tools of combating these arguments that you are bombarded with through the mass media. So what made Israel to respond really with the counterattacks?
Well, it's not counterattacks. It's an act of self-defense. You have to understand, we're talking about a vicious, murderous terror organization. This is like the Palestinian ISIS. They are a destabilizing factor in this region. Don't forget, Albert, we were enjoying the winds of change and hope in the Middle East after the Abraham Accord. And as Chaim said, internal political Palestinian issues, the Hamas desire to take control over the Palestinian agenda and to weaken the Palestinian Authority, the Fatah movement, this is what caused this entire campaign, the loss of lives, etc., the destruction that we have witnessed to both sides. Now, we have suffered more than 4,000 rockets that were fired at us from within civilian centers in the Gaza Strip, okay? The Hamas is using their own population as human shields. This is a war crime. They are the worst enemies of their own population. And then, second thing, they are launching these rockets towards most populated civilian centers in Israel. And their desire is to cause as many Israelis killed as possible and to injure as many Israelis. And by the way, regardless of their nationality, color, race, whatever, we had Muslim Arabs killed, we had workers from India killed during this campaign. They shoot at us indiscriminately. Can you imagine? Israel is a relatively small country. It is more or less the size of New Jersey. More than 4,000 rockets fired at us indiscriminately. What country would have endured such a thing? So we had to protect ourselves, and we had to protect our civilians, and we had to make sure that this terrorist infrastructure is being destroyed. Okay, so I think one has to say that really Israel tried to do the most measured and accurate military campaign possible. We really targeted only military targets, all their terror infrastructure, their tunnels of terror that were about to be used in order to kidnap Israelis and to launch terror attacks, the launchers of all these rockets, the manufacturing sites, and so on and so forth. Again, when you look at the situation, it is so painful because they are using the Palestinians themselves as their guardians, as their human shields, and they fire at us from hospitals, from mosques, from kindergartens. They really have no mercy, no emotions to their own population, and they are trying to kill as many Israelis as possible. We had to protect ourselves, and we had to make sure that this terrorist infrastructure is being destroyed and eliminated.
So what parties actually fuel the conflict, and what do they gain from this conflict?
Well, I'll tell you in short, radicals, they fuel this conflict. Hamas, they want to defame the state of Israel by showing that we are committing war crimes and that we are criminals. They used an excuse to launch these rockets at Israeli civilians. They said that Israeli police is breaking into Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they showed terrifying visuals. And when you see that on the media, they basically leave you one option to say what in the world is the Israeli police is doing over there. But the truth is that these radicals were actually throwing rocks at Israeli police. They were launching, firing fireworks at our police. And then they run to hide inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And, you have to ask yourself this one important question. Have they lost their respect to this holy site? because the Temple Mount is holy not only to the Jews. We had our 2 temples on that mount. It is also holy to Muslims and Christians alike, and under Israeli sovereignty, all religions are able to worship there freely. So by throwing rocks at that site, they basically show that they have no respect to their own mosque as well. And I can tell you another thing. What do they gain from that? Hamas wants to defame Israel, as I've said earlier. They use their very, I would say, good propaganda machine, because the media is falling for that. I was an IDF soldier. I served in the Armored Corps. I was a combat medic. And I can tell you that I have treated more Palestinians and Syrians than I ever treated Israelis. As an IDF combat medic, I saved the lives of Palestinians and I saved the lives of Syrians. Right now in Israeli hospitals, you have Gazan civilians being treated in our hospitals. I have seen it with my own eyes at Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. If I, an Israeli citizen, entered the Gaza Strip, would I come back alive? Probably not. And that's something that the world has to understand, that the media is being used, unfortunately, as a tool in the hands of these terrorists. And again, Iran is the one that is standing behind these terrorist organizations. Iran, the Islamic regime in Iran, is fueling Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, Houthis in Yemen. They basically sponsor 99% of terrorism in the Middle East. And this is just outrageous to think that the media is focused on the war crimes that we are supposedly committing and totally turning a blind eye to what's happening within Iran and, you know, the war crimes that are being committed by the Islamic regime in Iran.
So has this conflict been somewhat different from the earlier conflicts that we've had with Gaza?
On one hand, it's the same old story. We just recently celebrated 73 years to the foundation of the Israeli Defense Forces. So for 73 years, terrorist attacks and terrorist groups have been trying to harm Israeli citizens inside the state of Israel. And for 73 years, the IDF has been defending Israeli citizens. And we've been doing everything we can to make sure that they don't damage or harm or kill Israelis. And so on one hand, it's the same old story. And on the other hand, what we've seen recently is a complete decision by Hamas and other terrorist groups inside the Gaza Strip to try to overwhelm our systems and do everything that they can to harm Israeli citizens. So for example, we have the Iron Dome aerial defense system, one of our best aerial defense systems, combat proven, 90% success rate. So over 4,000 rockets, massive rocket barrages launched from the Gaza Strip at Israeli citizens, and the Iron Dome has a success rate of about 90%. And these terrorist groups have been doing everything they can do recently to try to overwhelm the system, and they haven't been successful. In addition, this past operation, we have been focusing on destroying military enemy infrastructure without putting in a single Israeli soldier inside the Gaza Strip, and we've done that successfully. We've carried out airstrikes and artillery strikes and all different kinds of fire support, where we can destroy enemy capabilities, stockpiling, terror tunnels, all of these different infrastructures, which are military, combatant, and they are designed to hurt Israeli citizens, and we have been destroying those capabilities in order to keep Israelis safe.
Well, so what actions did Israel really take to prevent the casualties?
Oh, well, that's an easy one. What no other army has had to do and what no other army has done. You might recall in 2008 the Goldstone report of the UN that accused Israel of war crimes. We realized we had a problem. We had a terrorist sorted bloc in Gaza who takes advantage of their own citizenry to hide to store weapons caches in apartment complexes, schools, mosques, UN buildings, hospitals. I wonder which direction is the war crime. So we had to undertake what no army has ever undertook. We acquired all the numbers of the military sites that Hamas, the civilian sites that Hamas used to store their military weapons. And I want to give you some statistics from where our moral actions come from in times of war. During Operation Cast Lead, this is in 2008, there was 2.5 million leaflets dropped warning civilians to leave the territory, 165,000 phone calls made, and over a dozen what we call hekesh agag, roof knocking, where basically this is a weakened kind of firework, an explosive device, which shakes the building, drops on the roof, warns people to get out. That's step one. Then drones have video where they see the people leaving, exiting the premises. That's step two. The footage is given to the HQ. The base says to the IDF in the sky, now all civilians have left the building, and only then do we drop. Can you name another army that does that, that engages that? I cannot. But yet, in this paradoxical fallen world, we're the ones that are accused of war crimes. In the latest conflagration, we didn't have a ground operation, and we were very welcome of the ceasefire that came after 10, 11 days. And, but we employed the humane and ethical tactics that we usually do. But then you have the moral numerologists who like to kind of draw up statistics of how many died on one side and how many died on another, and extort from that number some type of moral conclusion. It's usually called moral equivalency, but I don't even call it moral equivalency because they don't conflate Israel with Hamas. They confuse Israel with Hamas. This is more of a moral reversal. Well, for one, if they were to equalize Israel to Hamas, that would be giving Israel too much credit because that would legitimize them in their eyes too much. People should keep in mind that according to that sophist way of thinking, I suppose Nazi Germany was right in World War II because more German civilians died as opposed to the British. This is sophistry, this is casuistry, and it's more than shameful from someone who's originally American myself to see congressional leaders buying into this narrative and people, talk show hosts accusing us of apartheid, and I think of certain US Congresswomen saying the same, and especially someone in that position should know better.
So what did this conflict cost Israel? What losses?
First of all, we have 13 casualties, and we really grieve the loss of every innocent life. I want to say from both sides, we grieve the loss of every innocent life that has been taken during this campaign. And on top of that, you have to understand that this murderous terrorist organization has cost us a loss of about 7 billion shekels. That's the economic loss, according to the estimates of different economists here in Israel. It's about $2.5 billion, okay? And it's not only military expenditures, meaning Iron Dome infrastructure or Air Force strikes. It's also the fact that all our school system was closed. Okay, kindergartens, schools, high schools, all of them were closed. Our airport was shut down because they were launching their rockets at our airport. All the commerce and trade was closed. So really, we have suffered a great economic loss. Of course, first and foremost, we have casualties, and we have hundreds of people that are both physically and mentally injured. You know, in Sderot, when you go to the surrounding Gaza area and you meet the people that live there, and they lived for the last 2 decades under this terror threat on a daily basis. They get barrages of rockets that fall on their homes, and they have only 5 to 10 seconds to run for their lives. And you know, I met with a woman whose son is 18 years old, and he still wets in his bed. And you find a lot of kids, a lot of children that are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is something that they will have to carry for the rest of their lives. So really, it is a very, very painful loss. But I have to say, we also grieve the loss of lives of innocent Palestinians. At the end of the day, they are our neighbors, and we have to live together. And to see the amount of suffering on the Palestinian side caused by this terrorist organization that has taken them hostage is also terrible for us, because violence will lead to violence. And if we want to bring a better future for our children and for our great-grandchildren, we need to work on positive, constructive foundations. And when you see what Hamas does with the money it gets, you know, Hanania spoke before about the financing mechanisms of terror. And Chaim says, show me the money. And indeed, if they would have taken all the money that was poured at them from the international community, if it's United Nations agencies or if it's donor countries, and if they have invested it in their infrastructure, building a strong economy, a welfare system that would bring joy and welfare to their own population, we could have lived beautiful life, you know, secured and safe and peaceful life next to each other. So again, the international community has to make sure that all these radical ideologies that call to wipe out Israel and see nothing but Hamas or jihadi waqf in the holy sites, we have to make sure that all these ideologies are being, they fade away. They do not exist any longer.
During this kind of a conflict, I think our audience, our friends are bombarded with horrible pictures of little children being killed, and they have no clue where these pictures were taken from. They don't know whether it's true or not. And you have been able to really provide some very helpful, handy images, pictures, and video clips to empower our friends.
First of all, I have to say that there were casualties in Gaza. There were Palestinians that died. And as an Israeli, it breaks my heart. Does the world think that we are happy about anyone that dies? Does the world think that our soldiers are enjoying being at the border rather than staying at home? Obviously not. You know, throughout this operation, we have seen a lot of different images, and surprisingly, the vast majority of them didn't even come from Gaza. You know, I even saw politicians around the world, members of parliament, sharing these images that, you know, that I can tell you in particular. There was this image of a little beautiful girl that, you know, they said that she died from an airstrike inside the Gaza Strip. And they said, well, they even gave this girl a name. Well, but what we found out is that, well, this beautiful girl is actually a Russian child model that still, you know, she's alive and she's having a, you know, great time in Russia. And that, you know, you are seeing a lot of fake news on social media. It is honestly hard to believe this. And that's why I want to add to what Sharon and Chaim have said, that you know, Hamas does not care for their own people. They would rather use real images because they want their people to die as long as they can blame it on Israel. So these fake news that we are witnessing are troubling, because people abroad who may support Israel are questioning, is the country that I support is committing war crimes? Are these children died? And is this information that I'm seeing right now is real or not?
In regards to the battle, how does Hamas's methods of engaging in operations differ from Israel?
It's ridiculous to compare them at all, because on one hand we have the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, whose goal is to protect Israeli citizens. We are an army of a democratic country. And on the other hand, we have a terrorist organization whose stated goal is to kill and harm Israeli citizens and civilians. So you can't really compare the two causes and the two goals. But we've seen rocket barrages from within civilian territories in the Gaza Strip. They shoot from schools and hospitals and mosques, and we watch these rocket launches from these heavily populated civilian areas inside the Gaza Strip in order to kill and harm Israelis in the state of Israel. And so that's a terrorist organization. And on the other hand, we have the IDF, an army of a democratic state. And what we do is we protect our civilians, we defend our country. And so that's our goal. I work in fire support. So what I do in the Army is I identify military targets. We research these targets, we plan our attacks, and we make sure that we carry out these attacks in the most surgical, precise way that we can. That's my job. That's what we do, my colleagues and I. And so our goal is to destroy this military organization, these terrorists inside the Gaza Strip, destroy this infrastructure, and make sure that they can't have the ability to harm our citizens.
Hamas provoked this conflict. But what was their goal, and what was Israel's goal with this battle?
Well, as far as Israel goes, I think it was one of the Platonic dialogues. Plato made the point that peace is a parenthesis. When you read history of war, war is the main body, and peace comes in parentheses. Israel hopes one day to extract that peace from its parenthetical confinement, but in the meantime, we want to extend it for as long as possible. When we do these operations, we're hoping to get as many years as we can of quietus. As far as Hamas goes, in the short term, well, in the long term, they want to impose, basically, if you read their charter, it reads like a modern day Mein Kampf, the original 88 charter. Even with their updated modern modifications, the Charter 2.0, if anybody believes that just because they took out their racist and anti-Semitic tropes that were in the original one, if you believe them, I'll leave the ... there. As far as the short-term military goals of Hamas and propaganda goals of Hamas, I believe they achieved them, to tell you the truth. They achieved international recognition of their cause and condemnation of Israel through the propaganda machine. They achieved a large tranche of the American Congress calling Israel an apartheid state, accusing us of ethnic cleansing. They achieved John Oliver calling us baby killers. I think that they are more than satisfied for the sacrifices that they made of their own people and our own for the propagandistic benefits that redounded to them.
Well, I'm asking the same question that I asked Hanania. People, when they are bombarded, our friends that are bombarded by these images and what the mass media brings to them, where can they find the arguments? Where can they find the tools to counter them?
First of all, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a very elaborated website. So you can Google MFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Israel, mfa.gov.il, and you will find all the talking points. You will find a lot of video clips. You will find a lot of footage that shows all these fake news that Hanania spoke about, all the lies that Hamas is spreading, all this public affairs campaign that is based on nothing. And you will find all the footage that can help you understand the real thing, the real events, and the real causes for this conflict. And you will find also the answers that you can give to whomever is trying to bash and attack Israel. I think it is really important that people will act right now, because we find ourselves in the midst of a war on public opinion. Okay, you see the amount of anti-Semitic incidents. You see the rise in anti-Semitism everywhere in the world. One has to remember, this is the only democracy in the Middle East. All the other forces in the Middle East are not democratic, and people have to defend this one democracy. This is also the only one Jewish state in the entire world, and we ask everyone to help us. and to help us in this battle on public opinion. We would like to ask our viewers to write letters to their congressmen, to write letters to their politicians, so their voice would be heard. We want to ask them to take part in rallies that support Israel. We want to ask them to invest in Israel, to help the Israeli companies that were hurt during this campaign. We want to ask them to play a very important role on social media, all different outlets of social media, to post a post on Facebook, use Twitter, and so on and so forth. First of all, to get all the information, if it's through MFA website, IDF spokesman website, everything is out there. There's a lot of information.
How does the international community really play a part in this, and what has their response been overall?
True. First of all, I want to mention that there are millions of supporters of Israel. They're just being silenced. And you see the difference. You can distinguish the difference between a pro-Israel rally and a anti-Israel rally, a pro-Palestinian rally. The pro-Israel rally, they chant peace. The pro-Palestinian rally, they don't criticize Israel's actions in Gaza. They criticize Israel's existence. They have a problem with our existence. And now I want to come back real quick to what Sharon said. Can you believe this? A Ministry of Foreign Affairs representative just said that she cares for Gazan civilians. Why isn't that on the news? Why isn't that on the media? You know, the international community, the ICC, for example, was established in the first place to deter war criminals, to make sure that what happened to the Jews will never happen again. They were a continuation to the court that prosecuted the Nazis and their collaborators. So nowadays you see these international bodies, the ICC, the United Nations, that were established on good principles and values in the first place, being taken hostage in the hands of foreign powers with interests. You know, instead of serving justice, these international communities are serving interests to attack Israel, to attack the one democracy in the Middle East. I mean, what do they expect us to do? They criticize Israel for using disproportionate force in the Gaza Strip, and I have to answer to that. What do they expect us? Do they expect us to send Hamas Iron Dome, you know, a few tanks and choppers? Do they? I mean, I understand that they don't want us to exist, but do they really expect us to cooperate with that? We have every right to defend ourselves because I was born and raised here. I was born in the Galilee. If not Israel, where else can I go to? You know, in 1936 or 38, you know, they told the Jews, leave Europe, go to Palestine. Nowadays, they tell us, leave Palestine, go back to Europe. You know, the conclusion is that they don't want us there, they don't want us here, but this is our homeland, so we're not going anywhere, and they have to understand that, including the international community, because Israel could be the greatest ally of the West and the international community. We are #1 in preserving human rights, just like Chaim mentioned that, you know, the Air Force, we are #1 in taking care of the Palestinians. In fact, we care for the Palestinians more than the Palestinian leadership itself.
So the core values of IDF, we mentioned a few instances here of knocking on the building and all of that, but how else were they expressed in this operation, and were there some real victories that you could mention and share?
I absolutely agree with everything that's been said here. Our enemy is not the Palestinian people. We don't have a problem with Gazans who are born and grow up and they want to go to school and they want to fulfill their potential in life. There's nothing, that's not something that the IDF acts against in any way. Our enemy is the militants inside the Gaza Strip who are taking those civilians hostage. And some of the ways that we relate to that, for example, the roof knocking. These are small ammunitions, they cause no damage, and we drop them on the roofs of buildings to let the people know inside the buildings to get out, and so that they have enough time to leave that building, because that building is a military target. There are intelligence sites inside those buildings, communications, weaponry stockpiles, operation rooms. These are all inside these buildings. So we're letting these civilians get out. In addition, we make phone calls. We're calling these people and we're telling them to get out because we don't want them to get hurt. We have no interest in them getting hurt in these attacks. In the Artillery Corps, we have unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. We have our newest UAV, the Skylark, the best UAV out there in the market, and we're using this to identify our targets. We're looking at our targets and we're realizing what's around. If there are children, we call off these strikes. I've called off strikes. My colleagues have called off strikes because there are children, because there are non-combatants. We do that all the time. And on the other hand, we can use this technology that we have, these UAVs, and we can identify who's a combatant, who's holding a rifle, who's coming to the border and has weapons on him. And so we use all of these different tools to strike just military targets and make sure that the civilians who aren't involved in the conflict stay safe.
The future. What does the future look like? I mean, this is, I hope to hear it from every one of you. What's the future holding for Israel?
In this area, in the neighborhood that we are, any country that lends its support to us is going to also get condemned by part of the Arab world. But I believe in the Abraham Accords has shown with the UAE, the benefits that redound to them in the long term when they can mute themselves to the anti-Semitic propaganda. It is in not only our interests, but the interest of everybody around us and the world at large for free trade of technology and medicine.
Well, in terms of the Jewish communities all over the world, what is the future holding up for them? Are they more willing to make Aliyah, to come to Israel?
Many of them are considering making Aliyah, but they are also strong. We have just worked on 3 solidarity missions that came from the US to Israel in order to show support for the state of Israel. We are strong, and we will be strong. And one has to understand, we destroyed Hamas capabilities. We are the winners of this campaign. Okay, so just to set the record straight, they lost their terrorist capabilities. And I think that the international community understands that we have to invest in the peace-seeking countries and regimes in our region. And we should fight to the fullest all these elements, whether it's countries of the axis of evil or whether it's vicious, murderous terrorist organizations and militias. We have to fight them in the strongest way possible. And it's, at the end of the day, it's quite simple. You have democracies and democratic values that we are fighting for, and you have murderous, vicious targets of other elements here in the Middle East. And I think that the international community understands what's happening here. Everybody understands that this campaign, especially from the part of Israel, was a campaign of self-defense after this barrage of rockets that were fired at Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the holiest city for the 3 Abrahamic religions, the holiest city. And I think that the international will get together and will put some thought into it in order to bring a better future for this region. We will invest in all our partners, in all our allies, including in the Islamic world, and we will bring more and more countries into the Abraham Accords and to the normalization process. And we will not let all these radical, extreme elements control this area. I think that the future is good, is great, both for Israel, both for Israelis, and of course for Jewish communities and Christian communities alike. All the moderate powers that want to seek peace, they will flourish.
The future from the viewpoint of the IDF.
The IDF will continue to defend Israeli citizens. That's our job. That's what we do every day. I wake up in the morning and I work on helping the IDF to defend Israeli citizens. And so we're going to continue investing in the Iron Dome and in these UAVs and these techniques like roof knocking and phone calls. We are going to continue investing in different ways that we can protect our citizens. We are going to continue researching and identifying military targets in the Gaza Strip and in other areas. We're going to continue to find these terrorists and all of these different military capabilities and destroy them, and so that we can keep the state of Israel strong and we can keep our citizens safe.
How does the future look, Hanania?
Everybody must support Israel. And I will tell you why. Don't support Israel blindly. Support Israel because right now these terrorist organizations are knocking, on our borders. But if we don't stop them, they'll come and knock on your borders as well. Do you know a terrorist organization that, once they completed their mission, they'll stop? Obviously not. So supporting Israel means supporting your security as well. Not to mention the fact that Israel helped Europe many times to foil ISIS attacks, terrorist attacks. We have the best intelligence, and we are able to do that very precisely and save the lives not just of Israelis, but Europeans, Americans alike. And what the future looks like in the Middle East, that's a question that I guess a lot of people are asking themselves. And I've been getting a lot of comments from Christians saying, do you think Israel is safe? First of all, I do believe that Israel is safe, probably the safest place to be. And the peacemakers are those that will inherit this land. Obviously, Israel is not the obstacle to peace. We just made peace with 4 Arab countries. So we are not the problem. It is the radicals that are the problem. And the thing is that radicals have no future in a peaceful Middle East. We are a peace-seeking nation, and we are here to stay. And I think that people that ask themselves, okay, so what can I do to support Israel? How can I help Israel from Germany, from Texas, wherever you are? I think that the best thing is to not be silent. Less than a century ago, our people were exterminated because partly because people were silent. When I visited Germany, I saw the trail rails that, they transferred the Jews, and you had villagers that were silent. They just didn't care. So nowadays, I ask you, I beg you, don't be silent. Stand up for Israel. Standing up for Israel is standing on the right side of history. You will not regret this.
To Hanania's point about the greater interest of Israel, this is not just a foreign, exotic, alien conflict that's 5,550 kilometers away from Washington. That's from New York, I'm not sure. That's where I'm from. But especially in this globalized world, it is directly and inexorably tied to the interests, especially of America and the Middle East and the countries that are making deals with us. Energy is usually also a driving factor of war. America depends greatly for a large tranche of its commercial traffic on the Straits of Hormuz and the Suez Canal. And if these are not stable, this can expand outward and affect, like you said, far shores, which are not that far, indeed.
And destabilize the entire world and hurt the world's security.
China understands it. Iran understands it. Russia understands it. This is part of the axis as well. As I said, follow the money. Iran, if you follow the dollar, it all goes back to Iran. And the world and the Middle East has to decide on which side of that divide they stand, because those are the choices. And you spoke of the Abrahamic Accords and the success of that, and we all hope it continues. I believe I could speak for everybody here.
Just as Israel has been fighting a physical war, it has also been fighting another war with unseen aggressors. 2 weeks ago, these aggressors attacked the Jerusalem Prayer Team Facebook page that has 77 million followers. Dr. Mike Evans, who has built this website, thanks to him, we are here at the Friends of Zion Heritage Center campus of the Jerusalem Prayer Team. And we want to promise that as Israel won this last campaign in Gaza, we will also win the media war. Thank you for watching, and please tune in June 9 and 10, Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast from the very heart of Jerusalem and from the Knesset, praying for the peace of Jerusalem, making peace from Jerusalem.
President Barack Obama is mocking Republicans.